Exciting times today as the Imperial Guard are finally getting their 9th edition Codex. Let's talk through every match play rule in the book with an in-depth review of Codex Astra Militarum. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today the long wait is finally over for Guard players. The very last faction to get their Codex of 9th edition have finally received theirs, bringing a much needed power boost alongside a whole bunch of interesting new rules and units. Overall, I'd say that the book is broadly good news for Guard players, though I must admit there is a bit of give and take in this one. A bunch of old favourites are gone, though there's a bunch of new stuff to replace it. I feel like it's not going to be to everyone's taste, with some classic options going, but I'm still a lot more excited to put Guard on the table than I was before. In this video we'll do a full review of all the rules in the Codex, talk about what's in it and the core rules of the army, then new orders and regimental tactics, all of the rule sections in the Codex, and talk about which are looking the strongest, and then finish up with a look through each and every datasheet and checking how it's changed compared with the previous and what's looking good. Loads to talk about it for the Guard, so let's jump straight into it. So in this video, as per normal on the channel, we'll be focusing on the match play rule section for playing the Imperial Guard in 9th edition 40k, and as per normal there's the other sections of the Codex, the Crusade rules, miniature galleries and lore. Some of those are kind of interesting, as we actually already talked about in other videos. The lore section rather unfortunately confirms Commissar Yarrick has fallen in the Emperor's service, and the miniature galleries do show us the upcoming contents of the Astra Militarum Combat Patrol box, seeming similar to the Cadiastan's launch box. Otherwise though, for match play rules, we've got regimental tactics with their orders, a new and slightly weird flavour of regiment rules, where you get to mix and match different regiments and then share traits. The stratagems are reimagined, some good ones gone but some powerful ones turn up. 3 tables of orders, including all new ones for commissars called the Prefectus Orders, character upgrades including the normal Warlord Traits, Relics and Psychic powers. Scions do get a few Warlord traits of their own, and the tank ace traits are back, perhaps unsurprisingly reimagined as points cost upgrades as opposed to command points. Then we've got datasheets, and there does seem to be an awful lot of chopping and changing with these. Broadly speaking, there's new points for things, and buff stat lines across the board, not uncommon with 9th, and there's a ton of new units in the book: Kazakin Rough Riders, the Cadian Castellan, the Rogal Dorn Battle Tank, a bunch of regiment-specific infantry units, field ordnance batteries, and also gaining the Aegis defence line as well, which was previously a generic choice for 40k in general. There's been a bit of mixing around as well. Some units are consolidated or kind of renamed. Say for example the command squad takes in the officers and the regimental advisors now, so that's the way you field them rather than having independent ones running around. But unfortunately, as losses on the unit side, there's really quite a lot of iconic Guard units that have been part of the rules and lore for ages. Infantry take a massive hit, as there's no way to field veterans, conscripts or special weapon squads anymore. All of those are pretty annoying losses, and are units that you can basically just use ones that Games Workshop sells for, so it's a bit irritating that they take them away. There's then a bunch of characters gone, notably Yarrick as we mentioned, Old Creed and Kell, though his daughter Ursula Creed seems to take up his mantle and does basically the same job. Knight Commander Pask is gone, run him as a generic tank commander now I guess. The Woadvane Psychers are missing. There's no more Crusaders, and I did wonder whether they might fold in other unique limited run miniatures like Severina Rain, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Otherwise, for rule sections that aren't in the Codex, a lot of support for Scions have been lost. Previously they had their own regiments and a bunch of stratagems for them. Quite a lot of those options are just gone now unfortunately. And the reimagination of regiment rules really is quite different. You don't get things like unique relics, warlord traits, or orders or things for say being Vostroyan. They're all kind of nominated under keywords. There also was some rumours about fielding more units with the platoon keyword. That apparently does not seem to be the case unfortunately. Kind of sad that, as I think it would have been fun to field multiple units per detachment slot. It would have just been a bit of nice return to flexibility and allowed you to field some infantry units en masse, and in fact the detachment slots have got a bit more restrictive if anything, as we've lost the opportunity to field quite a lot of units in squadrons that were able to before. Leman Russes still can, but things like Hydras, Basilisks and Valkyries, they can no longer be fielded in squadrons. Finally, and perhaps not unexpectedly given the Demon Codex, there's no secondary objectives in here. I guess if you're using secondaries then you just use the one from the Nephilim mission pack. They've decided against reprinting them and having 2 similar but slightly different options. Overall, as I said, definitely a bit of give and take. I guess with the sheer amount of rules available to some factions, often they're going to be taking away as well as giving. I do feel that losing some of the unique units really was quite sad though. Veterans, conscripts and special weapons and Yarrick, they're all going to be missed. Moving on to core rules for the Guard, and here are just a few things that apply across the army and the way that you field it. First up, detachment rules basically have a chain of command. If you've got the new Lord Solar in your army, he has to be the Warlord. If not, then it's got to be one of the commandants, say the Cadian Castellan, and then if you don't have any of them, then you nominate an officer instead. Kind of makes logical sense, and they have a similar sort of special rule to several other armies. You can only take one commandant keyword unit per detachment. Objective secured is gained by troop slots. Unfortunately, there's a small flavour loss in that you no longer get it for Russes in spearheads, it would seem. It wasn't always taken advantage of by loads of people, but that could be quite good fun for desperate late game objective bids. Scions don't have a ton of support in the book, but at least you can still basically run an army of them if you should so choose to. Scion squads have been removed to elites from troops now, but if you field an entire Scion detachment with only the Militarum Tempestus keyword things, plus things like Commissars and Auxilia, then you can count your standard Militarum Tempestus as troops rather than elites, so they can still get objectives secured, and you can still take lots if so desired. Otherwise, for a few common rules across datasheets, orders and regimental tactics apply to the vast majority of units, and we'll go over them. Another really common upgrade across the Codex is the turret weapon boost. This applies to the big tank guns, things like Baneblades, Russes, and Dorn tanks, but also interestingly things like Chimera and Hellhound turrets, and it's quite a nice boost to those. The main thing that you get with that is a +1 to hit with those turret weapons, hitting on 3s normally unless you're bracketed. Really quite nice for being a bit more resistant to modifiers for guard, I think. And also, and pretty importantly, it lets you fire out of melee as well. So if your tank's locked up, then you get to still shoot at a different unit, but you do take a -1 to hit penalty if there's still troops in engagement range with you and you're firing with heavy weapons. That last bit's particularly nice for any blast weapons that would otherwise be made useless by an enemy infantry squad tagging the tank in combat. Really good for demolishers and things, and isn't bad for the auto-hitting Hellhounds either, as they won't care about that -1 to hit penalty. There's a few bits of war gear throughout the book. Perhaps the infantry and vehicle upgrades are some of the most interesting. Vox casters now allow you to transmit an order from a Master Vox to the Vox unit within 24 inches, a little bit of a boost on their previous order range, so they're a bit more useful, and they do remain free. For vehicle upgrades, the auger arrays seem to have gone. You can still take hunter-killer missiles on most things that could before, and otherwise two of the common vehicle upgrades across multiple units are armoured tracks. This gives you +5 points for a +1 save against damage 1 weapons. I think that's usable to be honest, but maybe not mandatory. Damage 1 weapons could certainly irritate you, but they're unlikely to be killing battle tanks in their own right, at least for most armies. Otherwise, dozer blades are 5 points. They allow you to ignore movement modifiers and give you an extra boost if you use a blitz them tank order. To be honest, I don't really see them being worth the 5 points the vast majority of the time, unless you're going for something very specific. Finally, for one thing that I was wondering whether or not it might be in the core rules, there is very much no mention of Armour of Contempt here. Currently the guard vehicles get it as per the balanced data slate. Guard players are generally going to be in a bit of limbo as to whether or not that's still going to apply to the new book, and when Games Workshop next updates their balanced data slate. I'll certainly talk about that on the channel a bit more in depth when we do find out. On a poll of users as to whether or not they'd retain it, at the moment people think it's around about 50-50, and it's kind of interesting as it's just a really big boost that the guard could either receive or lose. In any case, broadly expected stuff here. The detachment rules are as I'd expect really, kind of a shame to lose Auspex Russes, and that turret weapon boost is a seriously decent boost to tank armies. Looking into the rule sections, I thought we'd start out with orders and regimental tactics. As per the current Guard Codex, the officers get the voice of command rule, and depending on which officer you're using, you can issue between 1 to 3 orders each turn. They are done in the command phase now rather than the start of the shooting phase, and you can even issue orders if you're within a Chimera now, as it has a command vehicle keyword. Moving orders to the command phase could have been problematic, but fortunately Games Workshop have thought of disembarking from transports. You can now also issue orders if you get out of a tank, though you do have to target one specific unit for that. You don't get the splash effect as per regimental tactics below. In the Guard Codex, there were previously 2 tables of orders, and now there are 3. The regimental orders are the ones for most infantry, sentinels, and heavy weapon teams and field ordnance batteries. The mechanized ones are broadly for the vehicles that they can be affected by, and then Prefectus Orders are the commissar ones. They can generally apply to the regiment type units and also Militarum Auxilia. The way that it works in terms of keywords are the Regimental and Prefectus Orders target platoon keyword units, and commissars have a special rule on their datasheet, saying that they can order the Auxilia and infantry officer units as well, so could order, say, your command squad around, but they don't get the splash effect from regimental tactics if they do so. Mechanized orders go off a new squadron keyword. Kind of interesting that they've introduced the squadron keyword while removing vehicle squadrons for quite a lot of units. Squadron applies to most vehicles. I think it's just the Valkyries and the super heavies that don't get it, and it also applies to sentinels as well. If you basically have an allied guard detachment or something, then you just get to order 1 unit per order, but the pure guard army special rule is one called Regimental Tactics, and you get this if every single unit in your army is Astra Militarum, though it's not broken by Imperial agents like Inquisitors or unaligned things like Fortifications. Regimental Tactics is essentially a splash effect for an order. When an officer issues an order to one squad with the appropriate keyword, then any other units within 6 inches with that same keyword can also choose to take effect from that order as well. It means, say, you could issue Take Aim to one infantry squad and then have it apply to another 5 infantry squads that were clustered around them. The same is true for the tank orders, so you could have one tank order issue Gunner's Kill on sight, that affects one squadron unit, and again any other squadron units within 6 inches of that one that you issued the order to would also get the effect. It's pretty powerful and certainly makes your buffing characters go an awful lot further. Some of the units do get significantly better with orders, particularly things like Take Aim for infantry units, that's quite a brutal shooting buff, though I'd say you can still probably build an Astra Militarum army without it if desired, if you did say want to run guard as allies or something. It is very good, but maybe just doesn't seem absolutely make or break critical, like say for example Imperial Knights and farming their CP with their oaths. In general you still wouldn't want to use allies too much though, at least not in Nephilim type missions, as you'll be passing up the good secondary objectives for the guard. Let's take a look through those order tables then, and first up we have the Regimental Orders. These are known by standard officers Creed and the Lord Solar. They target platoon units. This includes most infantry, Tempestus Scions, field ordnance batteries and sentinels. It doesn't include characters for the most part though, besides I believe Guardsman Marbo. First rank fire, second rank fire was changed to lasguns becoming heavy 3. Previously it was rapid fire 2 lasguns, which gave you more shots at close range but less at long range. I'd say it's okay if you're using mass las fire at 24-inch range. For most units, I'd say that Take Aim is probably going to be the better pick though, at least more often. Take Aim is the +1 to hit and an extra pip of AP at range. This is pretty spectacular on literally any shooting infantry unit that you give to. Say for example, you could have Kazakin hitting on 2s and AP -3 on those hot shots, which does sound pretty savage, and it's pretty awesome on special or heavy weapons across the board really. I feel like this is just maybe one of the most simple and reliable orders to do just about every turn. Fixed Bayonets gives you a buff in combat, a +1 to hit, and an extra AP -1 that's better in melee. This one seems like it's great for the Rough Riders, the only real combat capable platoon units. They're pretty savage already, and with this they become absolutely ludicrous in terms of damage. Take Cover is a rather nice defensive one. The units ordered gain light cover or get dense cover if you already had light. It lasts until your next command phase. If the main role of your infantry unit is going to be to try and survive on an objective rather than deal damage, this one seems better. Again, this one could be a bit of a staple. Move has unsurprisingly been toned down quite a lot. Previously, it made your guardsmen ridiculously quick, though it's still not bad. It basically locks in a 14-inch move for most standard infantry. A little less than the old version got you, but it still gives you some very reliable movement getting to objectives and things. If you just need to dial this in to make sure that your squad does get to an objective, then all well and good. Finally, Suppression Fire is a new and surprisingly usable one I think. Units ordered by this must shoot one and only one enemy infantry unit, and if you score 5 or more hits then they become -1 to hit for their next turn. And given that you could have a very cheap unit giving a pretty potent debuff to something big and scary like a big Terminator unit or something, that really does seem pretty good as well. You just need to have something that can quite reliably hit those 5 hits. You could be seriously irritating some enemy units with mortars maybe with that, or just something else that had a lot of shots like mass las guns or maybe a frag grenade launcher or 2. Overall these seem well thought through and pretty great, loads of good situational ones. If you want to deal damage I think Take Aim's you go to, but extra speed, toughness or -1 to hit getting thrown out, all of those are good. Next up, for the tank commanders out there, we have Mechanised Orders. You normally get these from tank commanders, though again Lord Solar can use them, and there's a tank ace upgrade that you can give you one as well. Normally they can target squadron type units, things like Russes and Dorn tanks, plus also most of the rest of the guard motor pool, Sentinels, Hellhounds, Chimeras, Tauroxes, artillery. It's mainly just the Valkyrie and the Baneblades that miss out. Going through them, again they seem very well thought out. Pound Them to Dust is a blast specific one. This one makes the enemy unit that you're targeting count as double for the purposes of blast weapons. It's situational but great on the right target. Anything between 6 and 10 models will get significantly hit harder by things like battle cannons or artillery. In the Guard Codex perhaps of all things, it's going to be a pretty nasty one. Full Throttle gives you an extra 2-inch movement, and if you advance then you still count as stationary. Could be anything up to 8 inch of extra movement and still shooting potentially. Generally, I'd say this isn't the ideal one that you want to use, but if it makes the difference of getting a key line of sight or not doing so, I feel like this will be quite a good troubleshooter one. Gunner's Kill on sight gives you reroll ones to hit, nice and reliable extra damage output there, plus is particularly good with things like Plasma Cannon Sentinels or Leman Russ Executioners, hard to go too far wrong with that. Blitz them is when you want to have your tanks try and run over something in combat. You get +1 to your charges, and if you make contact, then on a 4+, you get D3 mortal wounds with a +1 if you have Dozer Blades. If you just desperately need to roadkill an infantry or two, then this one is pretty usable, I think. Plus could be kind of fun with sentinels with chainsaws. That seems quite a powerful one, as you could potentially get up to 3 command phase worth of goodness out of that. Won't be relevant or necessary a lot of the time, but when it is, it'll be a big deal. And finally, Pinning Fire is sort of a mirror of the infantry one. Again, just shoot your tank against one infantry unit. If you score 5 or more hits, then it makes them -2 inches to their movement. I feel like this one is kind of niche to be honest, but slowing down a big enemy scary unit could be irritating for them. Again, you just need to make sure that you're doing it with something that spams out enough hits to make it worth it, maybe something like a Wyvern. Overall, again like the infantry units, I'd say that this is a very usable table. In general, for raw damage output, I'd say the default would be the Gunner's one, but a lot of units will actually get more value out of Pound Them to Dust. It just depends on your units and your opponent's ones. The extra speed is great, and then Obsec, Blitz Them and Pinning Fire are all good but situational. Finally, we've got Prefectus Orders. These ones are typically on Commissars and the Lord Solar. There are a couple of ways that you can get more access to them, such as a relic to give a unit a different type of orders, and also a tank ace upgrades to make one tank into a kind of Commissar tank. These ones are like the Regimental Orders in that they tag off the platoon keyword, so most guard infantry, heavy weapon teams and field ordnance batteries, and also sentinels. As mentioned, Commissars can affect things like the Abhuman Auxiliary and infantry officers as well, but if they do that then they don't get the splash effects to spread the order around to loads of things. I'd also be aware that as before, it's one order per unit ordered. You can't say stack a Prefectus order with a regimental order on the same infantry unit. The Prefectus ones though just do seem like a really quite nice support package of situational things, but there's almost always going to be something that looks useful I think. We've got get back in the fights to fall back and shoot or fall back and charge, good insurance against being locked up for infantry. Forwards for the Emperor to allow you to move in advance and still shoot as if you were stationary. Nice for say heavy weapon squads repositioning, or if you need to advance to get on an objective or something and still keeping a little bit of damage output going. At all costs is quite a nice one, giving you objective secured, plus you count as +1 model if you already had it. Again, like the Tank Commander one, when that matters it will be big. Quite nice that you could put that on the Bulgrins and things. You could have a massive Obsec Bulgrin Death Star if you so desired. Duty and Honour allows you to do actions even if you fell back, advanced, and you can still shoot without failing them. Again, this was a really nice trick that you might just need once or twice per game. Gets a little bit of fire going while you're still doing objectives, or might put you in a position where you can advance and raise a banner. Show them Steel, Show them Contempt gives you a +1 leadership and a 5+ save against mortal wounds. The leadership is kind of meh, but if you're just about to eat 1,000 Suns psychic phase, then getting a 5+ save across multiple units could be great. And finally, we've got Remain Vigilant. If your opponent's making big use of reserves, then this one could really throw a spanner in the works. Enemy units can't set up within 12 inches of this ordered one, and they get a 5+ to hit if they're overwatching as well. The 12-inch denial thing is pretty punishing for holding down objectives. It means that your opponent will basically never be able to get a deep strike charge off against the unit that you're being ordered, and if you're playing against something like Gene Stealer cults, then that's going to be absolutely horrible for one of their core mechanics. At 40 points for a Commissar, I really can see these being worth it if you've got enough platoon units to order. You would have to commit to infantry in a reasonably big way, but the sheer amount of flexible, powerful options of this means they're almost always going to have enough value to justify them, I think. I feel like it might make a bit of a decision paralysis though. There's a whole load of options on the table and different ways that you could make your army stronger. It'd be a bit tricky to pick the best in some situations. Moving on next, let's talk about the new system of regimental doctrines, which is vastly different to a bunch of other ways that other factions once work. You now no longer have to designate your entire army as say Cadian, Kaschan or Vostroyan or something. You can field mixed regiments, which is kind of fluffy for the guard. Now you basically just declare your entire army is using 2 different ones of these doctrines that best represent your fighting style, or you can choose a couple of picks that take up just the one selection, either the Born Soldiers one or Trophy Hunters. The units that get these trait buffs are the vast majority of the army. They key off anything with the regimental keyword, so things like infantry squads or the battle tanks, anything that would have been clearly Cadian, Kaschan or Vostroyan or things before, they all get the rule. It also includes all the special characters, things like Harker, Leontus or New Creed. The ones that don't get these rules, though, unfortunately, are the Tempestus Scions, which I think really does put them on a bit of a back foot. They get their Stormtroopers 6s to hit explode, but in general I feel like that's usually going to be a bit lackluster compared with some of these. It's everything Militarum Tempestus that doesn't get that, the Aeronautica Imperialis Valkyrie, the Regimental Advisors like the Master of the Ordnance and things, Militarum Auxilia, so the Borgrins and Ratlings and Ogrins, and also Commissars of the Officio Prefectus. I think Scions not getting these is perhaps the saddest thing. It really does feel that they're losing out a bit compared with the regimental traits that they had before, but I think it is quite a nice touch that a lot of the special characters and things get it, and not feeling like you're being penalised for taking them. You also get these rules even if you have the specific unique units of one sort or another, so say like the specific Cadian Shock Troops or Death Corps of Krieg, they still get your custom regiment traits. The way that you pick these is you either take the apparently default Born Soldiers one, this one counts as both selections and it gives you 2 special rules, or you combine 2 of the other traits from the list that we'll go through in a second. Born Soldiers does seem simple and usable to be honest, could cut through a bit of decision paralysis if you just want to get guard on the table. This one works very similarly to the way that Hammer of the Emperor worked, 6s to hit, auto wound the enemy, particularly good with anything low strength like lasguns or hotshots. It's actually technically had a small buff as well from the balanced data slate version, in that 6s to hit counters 6s to wound as well. A lot of the time that's not enormously relevant, but it is for things like sniper rifles where you get them, and a stratagem or 2 like the hotshot lasgun one to get you mortal wounds on 6s. There is also a Born Soldier stratagem as well that makes the result go off on 5s. That is actually quite a significant damage boost to big units. Finally, it also comes paired with a small leadership buff. Platoon units within 6 inches of their officers can use their leadership, not nothing with the Imperial Guard, as they are a faction that can be punished by failed morale tests. I think it's hard to go too far wrong with just flat extra damage like that, though I don't think it's so good that it makes combos of the other custom ones completely useless. They do seem like good ways to build a bit more of a theme list going around certain tactics. Going through the big list of them, we've got 15 others, most of which can be combined with any 2 of them. Only one of them, Trophy Hunters, counts as 2 selections, which is a bit weird as it's not even really all that good. I suppose it could be quite good to tailor matchups if you knew you were playing Knights or something. First up, we've got Expert Bombardiers. This one looks like a very nice artillery boost. Your army gains a keyword that allows a stratagem with like an orbital strike type mechanic, but more importantly, any artillery keyworded units get +1 to hit against targets within 12 inches of a Voxcaster or a Sentinel. Sentinels do look pretty reasonable to have starting on the front lines, and they can get quite close to the enemy very quickly, so could allow some punishing alpha strikes. And Voxcasters with infantry could get up the board pretty quickly with move, or potentially using the mechanized one to jump out of transports. How good this is might depend on whether Games Workshop decide to remove Guard's exemption to the barrage nerf on the balanced data slate though. Until then though, this one looks pretty much auto-include if you're going to be spamming artillery. Veteran Guerrillas is the next one. You gain the keyword for this, and infantry and sentinel units ignore cover within 18 inches. A solid damage boost to anything that's dealing damage with special weapons. Kazakin in particular will really love this. Industrial Efficiency counts AP-1 attacks as AP0 across the board. That's basically the Armageddon Steel Legion one reimagined. Going to be interesting to see how that reacts with Armour of Contempt. If the guard vehicles do wind up retaining it, then I guess Games Workshop might even FAQ that to be different, much as they did with the Salamander's chapter tactic. Grim Demeanor is basically the Valhallan one reimagined. You gain a keyword for an interesting shoots into combat stratagem, and you also get to ignore combat attrition modifiers as well, so if you've got a lot of infantry units that might run away, that could save you a casualty here and there. Parade Drill means that lasguns gain heavy 2 when they're stationary. Not super exciting to be honest. I think most things are usually going to be wanting to be on the move. Maybe just not quite enough to get there in my opinion. Cult of Sacrifice is kind of a reimagination of the Krieg one. This one gives you the keyword for an artillery bombardment stratagem, and your units get a +1 to hit if they've taken a casualty in the unit. Not bad if you've taken some chip damage to a squad and still have some special weapons left, I guess. A bit niche though, a lot of the time in 40k things tend to just live or die and not just take a little bit of damage. Mechanized Infantry I think is really strong. Again, it gains the keyword, plus you get to disembark after a transport has made a normal move. This one seems awesome for delivering troops onto objectives, or getting Kazakin in range for a brutal volley of special weapons and hotshots. Armoured Superiority gains you the keyword again for a stratagem. This one's one that can help out on objectives with your mechanized units. Sentinels count as 3 models, most other vehicles count as 5, and Super Heavies count as a mighty 10. Could be quite a big deal to shift if you do layer on that tank order for OBSEC I suppose. Blitz Division is a rather interesting one for strategic reserves. Things count as half power level for determining the CP cost of strategic reserves, and if vehicles turn up in round 2, they get to treat it as round 3, so could even set up in the enemy deployment zone and be kind of aggressive and things like that. Not super convinced by that one, to be honest. I guess it could help keep your tanks safe from enemy alpha strikes, but being off the board for a turn is quite a big deal in 9th. Heirloom weapons is kind of the reimagined Vostroyan one. This one just gives you plus 4-inch range to all guns besides relics. Another very nice one, this one, that's just going to help out army wide. Short range stuff like flamers and melter guns are particularly interesting perhaps, and it's great for anything with a 24-inch range as well. Things like the secondary weapons on the Rogal Dorn or the Leman Russ Demolisher. Trophy Hunter, as mentioned, counts as 2 selections, so you can't combine it with other things. It's very powerful against the right targets though. You get plus 1 strength to any of your attacks, range and melee, against vehicles and monsters. Could be handy getting some things to certain breakpoints, strength 9 melter guns for example, or strength 8 autocannons. It just seems really swingy though. Against armies that run a lot of monsters and vehicles like knights, you're going to have a great time. If you're playing something like Foot Custodies, a Necron Destroyer list, or a whole load of Sisters on foot, it's basically going to be almost a waste of a doctrine. I guess if you and your opponents are allowing yourselves to list tailor to each other's lists though, it's maybe not the worst if you're thinking that you're going to be running into knights or something else with loads of monsters or vehicles. Brutal Strength is the reimagination of the Catachan one. This one allows you to move and shoot with heavy weapons, making the standard infantry unit just that little bit more interesting for them. And also you get plus 1 strength in the first round of melee. That one's just for infantry again. I guess that would have been pretty brutal if you could have applied it to things like Rough Riders. For me, I'm just not sure if it really quite gets there for making guard into a viable melee threat. You can't get 3 attacks per guardsman anymore with things like Strachan and Priests. I guess perhaps some of the best recipients of this could be the infantry officers, I suppose. Elite Sharpshooters seems pretty usable. You gain the keyword for this one for a stratagem, plus you get to reroll 1 hit per unit. This one will be useful if you have absolutely loads of units, and particularly lots of units with 1 decent shot. Say you took a lot of infantry squads with a single lath cannon, or maybe a few Leman Russ Vanquishers, where a big hit reroll is going to be awesome if you miss with that cannon. Seems a perfectly usable one if you just want a damage buff if you're unsure. Very hard to go wrong with that one, I think. Let's Swift to the Wind next. This one makes infantry or artillery move an extra 1 inches, and everything else gets an extra 2-inch movement, and they all get plus 1 to their charges as well. Again, pretty nice and seems very usable. Having extra movement is going to get you more lines of sight, or get you to objectives just that little bit more. Maybe it's particularly nice if you want to be using Rough Riders with that one. It'd effectively give them an extra 3 inches worth of threat range for melee as their cavalry. Finally, we've got Recon Operators. This one's one for infantry, cavalry, and sentinels, and for anything that's set up within your deployment zone, you get to have an extra 6-inch movement pre-game before the game starts. Really quite a powerful mechanic this one, as it lets you get your units either maybe safe and hidden if the enemy gets first turn, or into alpha strike positions, or just advance towards the midfield objectives if you get first turn. Plenty of interesting ways that you could use that, but I guess you'd have to be going pretty light on the vehicles as it's not going to do anything for any of those. You also have to remove somewhere that's greater than 9 inches away from the enemy as well. Overall, I do feel they've done okay to make a fair few of these pretty usable. Definitely a lot of ways that you could go with this. Born Soldiers seems absolutely fine with the auto wounds, plus 4-inch range and a single hit reroll per unit army-wide is going to help out any major shooting list, and a bunch of the others seem genuinely quite strong as well. Expert Bombardiers for artillery, veteran guerrillas for Kazakin, maybe even combined with mechanized infantry to get them there. Armoured superiority will be handy enough for a big hitting tank list, and Swift of the Wind and Recon Operators both seem decent too. It'll be interesting to see what people take competitively, and whether or not raw shooting damage will win out over things like delivering infantry easily with the mechanized ability. Moving on, let's talk through some character upgrades and start out with the Warlord Traits. You can buy in extra ones like these just as standard, and as mentioned, you have to have your actual Warlord as per the chain of command, though you can buy in traits for other things. If you give a Warlord trait to a non-officer though, it has to be frontline combatants. That's a melee one that gives your combat attacks an extra 2 hits on 6s, plus an extra +1 to wound in melee, and that's actually a spectacularly good buff for guard combat. If you do have CP spare and fancy a fun build, it could be fun to combine that with a Claw of the Desert Tigers, a whole flurry of power sword attacks at +1 to wounds and getting extra hits. It's almost certainly best on Iron Hand Strachan though, who already punches very hard and is quite a good buff character. I feel like if you're using him, it's probably worth shelling out the CP for this trait. Master Tactician is a good one. Redeploy 3 units besides Titanics, and you can put them into strategic reserves for free if you like. Pretty much always a good one that gets you to either hide units or put them in alpha strike positions, and putting them in strategic reserves could be interesting too. New Creed gets that one if you make her the Warlord. Grand Strategist also seems pretty nice to have in the army. It's the same old 5+ to regenerate CP per command point that you spend. If you've got a free Warlord trait available, that one seems great, and Lord Solar himself can take that one, so it's quite nice that he has a helpful one. Superior Tactical Training allows you to gain access to an extra table of orders that your unit doesn't normally know. It means that you could have an infantry officer ordering around tanks, which is pretty nice. It means that you could have tank orders on the go for a character protected unit. That does seem like a pretty interesting choice, to be honest. Then you wouldn't have to shell out for a big tank that you're not allowed to order. Could be nice to have the Commissar orders in play as well, even if you don't want to have the points to shell out for an actual Commissar. A lot of their choices are kind of situational, but it could give you some seriously powerful flexible options if raw damage or move or something wasn't what was required. Old Grudges is kind of similar. You get to select one enemy unit, and then for the rest of the game you get an aura of +1 to wound against that unit, but just for platoon or battle tank squadron units. It does seem that this doesn't apply to artillery anymore. Still though, +1 to wound against perhaps the primary target in the enemy army is very nice. If they've got a big tanky Death Star unit, then it could allow you to really lay some serious fire into them. Finally, we've got Lead by Example. This one can allow you to issue orders to your own unit. Commissar Gaunt gets this. I guess could be okay on a tooled up command squad with a bunch of special weapons maybe. And Gaunt's unit themselves would certainly get some interesting value out of those picks. They could pick up objectives secured from it. Could again also be a way to get a tank commander that can actually have orders as well. I feel like this one's interesting enough, but maybe not quite as standout as some of the rest perhaps. Overall for the standard ones, I'd say that this is a really good table of Warlord traits. Redeploying and farming CP are both great, as are getting things like cheap tank orders or flexible commissar orders, and literally all the rest are usable as well for the right situation. Kind of spoilt for choice here, either pick up just some very strong generic buffs, or try and do something a bit more adventurous and crazy with a unit and making itself better. The Militarum Tempestus also get 3 different Warlord traits as well, and again perhaps following in the example of the primary Warlord traits, then they're also very good buffs to nearby Tempestus Scion units. I'd say perhaps they're one of the best reasons to actually run Scions if you want to use them as damage dealers. First up, we've got Drill Commander of an aura of friendly Militarum Tempestus, get to rapid fire their weapons out to maximum range. Nice for hotshot lasguns hitting their foe at 24 inches with 2 shots, that does seem pretty cool. Plus it also affects their special weapons as well. Could be very nice on squads with 2 hotshot volley guns and 2 plasma guns for example. Precision Targeting is an aura of 6 inches for Militarum Tempestus to get Ignore Cover, again very useful. Reducing enemy saves and ignoring dense cover are both nice. And finally the last one, which is perhaps even better, is Uncompromising Prosecution. Friendly Militarum Tempestus within 6 inches improve their AP of their attacks by 1. It means that you can get hotshot weapons all the way up to a pretty blistering AP of 4 if you also combine that with a stratagem. I find it kind of interesting that you could have multiple of these in play if you wanted on 2 different Tempestus Scion command squads. At least on paper it seems kind of interesting that you could be buffing all the infantry units within 6 inches to get all 3 of these buffs, plus their exploding 6s and rerolls from a regimental standard as well. They could be fairly savage all the way out to 24 inches with those. Probably over investment though, and it would eat up all your Warlord traits. Does seem pretty fun though if you were thinking about playing pure Scions. Overall, I'd say that Warlord Traits in general is a great section for the Guard. I'd expect most 2000 points to be running at least 2 of these, maybe even 3. Next up, we've got the Relics, which have seen a thorough reimagination. A few of the regiment-specific ones have also made their way into this section as well, so quite good that a few things aren't going away. Running through the list, and the Emperor's Benediction is a Commissar-only bolt pistol, 18 inches and 3 shots, strength 4, AP -1 and damage 2. It ignores Lookout Sir, and 6s to wound deal a mortal wound. Not awful if you can keep it firing for multiple turns, but I do find this one kind of uninspiring. The Tactical Auto Reliquary of Tiberius allows you to get 1 extra order for an officer. Very solid for the extra flexibility. It looks like it could be a good combination with the one that allows you to know another section of orders. In theory, that's something like Acadian Castellan that could cast 3 different orders and have access to the Prefectus or mechanical ones as well. Seems very usable to me. The Death Mask of Alanius gives your infantry units a 4+ invul save. Generally, I'd say that's pretty weak on most characters. The way that you'd want to use that would be on a command squad. I guess if you're tooling one up with a whole bunch of regimental advisors plus maybe an Ogren bodyguard, could be interesting enough I guess. I still feel like it's going to be one that most people pass up. The Barbican's Key on the other hand I feel like is one of the best relics in the Codex. This one's infantry only and their unit gets to teleport anywhere on the board and reroll charges on the turn that they do. My first thought again would be probably to use it on command squads. with special weapons up close and things. Still seemed a bit lackluster on that, but it turns out that you can put this on most of the standard sergeant models as well. So perhaps the most obvious use of it looks like it will be a squad of Kazakin, juice them up with orders in the command phase, and then teleport them out to somewhere scary on the board and rain down some hotshot death. Looks like that'd be a very easy Alpha Strike option for an army with 100 points and a CP. Next up, we've got Kurov's Aquila. This one you trigger when an enemy uses a stratagem, and it costs +1 CP for the rest of the game. Can't be used on the command reroll. Definitely could mess with your opponent a bit if you do have a CP left over for this. Could be nice on something like Space Marine Transhuman Physiology or Knight Rotate Ion Shields and make decisions hard for your opponent. Gatekeeper, I think, is another really strong one. This one's a relic battle cannon for a tank commander. It's a really solid boost over the standard model. Rather than D6 plus 3 shots, you get D3 plus 6. It means that you're getting an average of 8 rather than 6.5. The strength is boosted to 9 and the AP to 3, and it's still flat damage 3. If you are using a tank commander, I can see this one being pretty popular. It's a nice general purpose anti-everything weapon that has enormous range. The Relic of Lost Cadia is only for Cadian models, so the command squad or the Castellan. It affects Cadian infantry units only, and it's a once per game aura of +1 to hit, +1 attack, and +1 leadership. I guess in theory you'd have this going off in a whole bunch of Cadian shock troops or something. The +1 to hit across a whole bunch of units is pretty nice, but you can achieve that pretty easily with Take Aim. I guess maybe the biggest advantage is that you could use a different order and then stack it with the +1 to hit, plus they get a little bit better in melee if you happen to follow up with a charge. I'm not sure if it quite gets there enough against some of the competition though. The Order of the Bastium Stellaris makes an infantry unit gain wound rolls of 1 to 3 always fail against it. Again, probably best on a command squad, a durability alternative to the 4+ invul save. Both of them seem okay. The Psi Sigil of Sanction is an upgrade for a Primaris Psyker. You get to know and cast 1 extra power each turn. It means that you could have Smite going alongside a couple of buffs, plus it gives you some extra flexibility as well. The Armor of Graf Tashenko gives you +1 wound and a 2+ armor save to your unit. That was previously a Vostro unlocked relic. I guess that might be most useful on a Cadian Castellan to keep them safe if you don't want them sniped. The Laurels of Command is interesting. This one allows you a once per game order at the start of any phase in the enemy's turn. It allows you to use most of the relevant ones. I feel like maybe the ones that will be helpful most will be pop-up objectives secured if it made the difference of gaining you some victory points, or potentially using that take cover style one to get you light cover when your opponent might not have been expecting it. The Claw of the Desert Tigers is a nice infantry combat relic. This one makes a power sword or power saber, strength +2, AP -3 and damage 2, and gives you +2 attacks as well. You can take this in squads as well, and if you just want an abnormally fighty squad or character, it doesn't seem the worst. The Clarion Proclamatus is a Vox upgrade that allows you to issue orders at unlimited range to other Vox units. Quite fun the idea that you could have a command squad sat back in the lines, completely hidden, and then be broadcasting their orders across the board. Quite nice to see radios being used like actual radios and not limited to short range. Next up, we've got a banner called the Finial of the Nemradesh First. This one's a relic standard, and it gives you a 6-inch aura of core units, ignoring modifiers to hit, and enemies can't use rules to ignore wounds, such as feel no pain and damage caps. The ignoring hit modifiers could be handy for a bunch of things, as well as enemy debuffs and dense cover. It would also let you ignore things like moving and shooting when firing heavy weapons or advancing. Of course, it's going to be super relevant if you do manage to target things that have a damage cap or feel no pain. That'll be a nice boost. For core things in the Codex, that does include things like Sentinels, but battle tanks aren't, I'm afraid, nor are things like Ogren or Bulgren. I feel like this one maybe hinges on having enough core units to buff. Maybe if you were affecting multiple Kazakin or Scion units or something, it could be alright. The Emperor's Fury is a relic plasma pistol, 3 shots at strength 8, AP -3 and damage 2. Not particularly exciting, but trading command points for extra damage. If you get to keep it firing for a few turns, then it will probably make its investment back. The Null Coat could maybe give you a little bit of psychic support for Scions. It gives a Tempesta Primal Commissar a Deny the Witch attempt, and that Deny the Witch attempt gets a +1 to the dice as well. Not terrible if you just want to cover that niche and you think there's going to be loads of spells around, but not super high yield. The Refractor Field Generator keeps you a little bit of flavour from one of the Scion regiments. This one gives you a 5+ invul save to infantry units within 6 inches. Again, could be kind of interesting to make a Scion battle line a bit more appealing, and them not die quite as fast. Lastly, we have the Legacy of Caladius. This one's a relic chainsword that gets you an extra 3 attacks at strength +1, AP -2 and damage 2. Maybe not too bad if you're taking brutal strength, perhaps for an extra +1 strength to get you to strength 5. In general though, I think I'm a bit more tempted by the power sword than this. Overall, I'd say it's another pretty solid section, a decent chunk of very usable options here. Maybe for my picks out of them, the Tactical Auto Reliquary of Tiberius is good, extra orders are nice, the Barbican's Key seems great on a jumpy Kazakin squad, and Gatekeeper just seems very nice for a very big and meaningful damage increase to a battle cannon, which is already pretty scary to start with. Plenty more are usable, but I feel like they might be some of the picks of the bunch. Psychic powers next, and the guard discipline has received a bit of a change. Now the way they work is Primaris Psychers can know and cast 2, so they got a lot more efficient. Astropaths can still cast 1, but are limited to the first 3 on the discipline. No more Psychic Maelstrom for them, but at least they can cast Smite on full power now. First up, we've got Terrifying Visions, Warp Charge 6, and it makes 1 unit -2 leadership. They can't use Insane Bravery or Remoral Morale, and if they try and do actions then on a 2d6 versus leadership, then they can't do it. As leadership debuffs go, it's okay. Being able to lock you out of Insane Bravery is quite nice, I guess. It actually means that you might have some chance of making them fail morale. Still though, always a bit of an edge case pick, as just some armies just really don't care about morale whatsoever. Gaze of the Emperor remains rubbish in my opinion. Warp Charge 6 as a beam attack. You draw a line between one target, and for each enemy unit crossed, then you get to roll a dice. On a 1 to 5 it's 1 mortal wound, and on a 6 it's D3. A lot of the time that's going to be the same or worse than Smite, and honestly I don't think it's worth having it in. Psychic Barrier has shifted, gone is the +1 to save, and now it's a 5+ invul save instead. Can be used on any guard unit, which is nice. Could be okay on Ogrin maybe. The tanks having high saves just mean it's a little bit less value on things like Leman Russes and Rogal Dorns, but I guess it is kind of effectively cheaper to include in the list now that Primaris Psychers get 2 casts. Not too bad, I feel like that's pretty reasonable as one of the selections for a Primaris Psyker. It is going to have some effect. Night Shroud though, I think is the better durability one. It means that the unit targeted can't be hit on an unmodified 1 to 3. It can affect any guard units, but can only affect super heavies on the roll of an 11+, though you do get to nominate the target after you've cast. I'd say this one's going to be solid on any unit that's very high investment and actually worth protecting. Maybe a valuable tank commander or tank case could be okay. It looks very good on the Rogal Dorn to make that annoying to kill, but doesn't seem unusable on other units, say Kazakin going and doing something brave and making them harder to remove, or Rough Riders in a big massed up unit. I feel like that might be one of the best of the discipline. Mental Shackles targets an enemy unit within 18 inches, gives you a -2 to your move and -2 to advance and charge rolls. You do have to get somewhat close for that one, but that's pretty annoying if you put it on something key. Interestingly, it looks like it could be stacked with that tank order as well to give you a full -4 to the movement. You really could slow down a unit quite a lot between those. Potentially that could be of interest if you're trying to hit something with that very scary Death Strike missile. Finally, Psychic Maelstrom is a pretty decent Witchfire. This one's Warp Charge 6 again and 18 inches. Roll 1d6 per the number scored on the Psychic test, so a 6 or more. For each 5+ is 1 mortal wound to the closest unit to a maximum of 6. Usually if you cast it that's going to be an average of at least 2 mortal wounds, and there's the potential to spike quite high with this one. Maybe not a bad one to have as a selection for something that's going to do something else. You could always flex into this plus Smite for quite a decent vomit of mortal wounds at the enemy. Overall seems like a usable enough discipline. I'd say that my favourites are Psychic Barrier, Night Shroud and Psychic Maelstrom, maybe with Terrifying Visions and Mental Shackles being situationally usable. Moving on, we come to the new and powerful tank case abilities. These appear for the guard in the Psychic Awakening supplement. Previously they costed you a CP each. Now, as predicted, they are a points cost upgrade instead. You pay 2 different points costs, one for regular battle tanks or Rogal Dorns, and the higher one for super heavies. The artillery ones are gone. No more full payload, I'm afraid, but to be fair, the artillery got some pretty massive flat buffs, to the extent where it doesn't really matter that much. Going down the table, and I do feel that most of these are pretty good to be honest. Vaunted Praetorian is 15 points or 30 on a super heavy, and it lets a Rogal Dorn or super heavy tank basically become an officer and can issue an order. If you happen to choose a super heavy for this, then it can issue an order to another Titanic unit if you have one. So basically you could have a Baneblade commander issuing one to another Baneblade. That one's certainly got potential, particularly with all the massive damage output they can do. I feel like maybe having the tank commander in the Rogal Dorn though seems like a better use of that one. Technically, rules as written at the moment, you wouldn't lose the squadron keyword, so you could order yourself. I wouldn't be too surprised though if that gets FAQ'd when the Guard Codex one drops. Meticulous Calibrator is 20 or 40 points. This one's a nice straightforward ignores cover. It's a pretty decent buff to a shooting unit with a whole pile of guns. Again, given that Rogal Dorns cost a whole load of points, probably more useful on them than battle tanks. And again, if you are going for a big investment Baneblade with extra sponsons and things, I'd say it's probably worth it to get the mileage out of all the guns. Mechanical Pack Rat gives you Transhuman Physiology, wound rolls of 1 to 3 always fail against it, 20 for the battle tanks and 30 for the super heavies. It will be pretty nice when it does come up, to be honest, but given that the battle tanks are toughness 8 already and the Rogal Dorn and Baneblades are now toughness 9, you're not going to be wounded on 3+ all that often really. Not terrible, but probably not standout. Veteran Commander is 20 or 30 points. This allows you to gain an additional regimental doctrine that no other unit in your army has. I guess could get you armoured superiority to count as more models on objectives maybe. Maybe elite sharpshooters for a Vanquisher tank, the extra 4-inch range for demolishers or Dawns perhaps. I think that you could also take trophy hunters as well, maybe if you were trying to go after vehicles. Not entirely sure of the wording on that one though, please correct me if I'm wrong on that. At 20 or 30 points for the privilege though, I do feel that that is quite a pricey one. Knight of Piety gives you a bit more durability, a 5+ invul save and a 5+ save against mortal wounds, never a particularly bad thing in 9th edition. Maybe that seems okay on something like a Rogal Dorn or Baneblade that you want to use aggressively and you think is going to be in the front ranks of the army. Master of Camouflage I think is pretty nice, a 25 or 35.1, it gets you light cover at greater than 12 inches or greater than 18 inches for super heavies. That's pretty meaningful on a 2+ save, doubly so if they keep Armour of Contempt, again seems pretty reasonable on both targets. Finally we've got a rather fun one in Steel Commissar for 25 points. The Tank Commander datasheet gets an additional Prefectus Order as well as their regular Mechanised Order, and they can issue this order as well. Again, similar to the Commissar, it can be used on infantry or abhuman units, so it could be interesting if you're putting tanks alongside troops. I feel that's maybe a bit take or leave though, rather than just paying the 40 points for a whole extra Commissar. At least that way you can put in where it actually makes sense to order the infantry, and he does have his own small combat stats as well. Overall though, seems like a very solid table. Vaunted Praetorian seems nice on the Dawn, ignoring cover or gaining light cover both seem like they could be worth the points, and pretty much all the rest at least seem usable if you want to, though maybe just a little bit more borderline for the points that you put in. Stratagems next, and another section that's seen a very big redesign. The Guard ones have been kind of desperate for an update for ages. They were written right at the start of 8th edition, before Games Workshop really knew that much about how stratagems work. There were just an awful lot of ones that you basically never use, and overall I think this section is a fair bit stronger, though a couple of staples are gone, like Take Cover or Hail of Fire for the Ross turrets. Quite a lot of them are either unlocked or made better by having a specific regimental trait as well, so there's still a bit of an element of the army that you pick gets to use the stratagems in a different way. First up, we're starting off very strong with Armoured Fist. A core unit disembarking from a transport gets to reroll wound rolls against the closest eligible targets. That really would be pretty massive on something like Kazakin disembarking with the Take Aim order applied, and it'd be easy to get them into position as well with the Mechanized Regimental trait. Seems like that could be worth it even on standard infantry squads a fair bit of the time, but it's probably going to be best with Kazakin or Scions. Vengeance for Cadia is 1 CP. This one's either issued by a Cadian officer to a platoon unit within 6 inches, or a Cadian infantry unit in themselves. The unit selected gets a +1 to wound against Chaos, again really quite a solid damage boost on anything with platoon, okay on things like heavy weapons, rough riders charging, or maybe even field ordnance batteries. For 1 CP, we've got another good one for Cadians. Cadia stands, which means that a Cadian infantry unit gets transhuman physiology. Wound rolls of 1 to 3 fail against that target. Unrestricted transhuman physiology is pretty awesome to have as a stratagem, to be honest. A lot of things are going to be wounding guard infantry on 3s or 2s, so that really is quite a nice boost. Seems like a pretty big advantage for Cadian shock troops in the troop slot, which already looked like perhaps the best troops already. Ingrained Precision is 1 CP. This one is for Born Soldiers units shooting, so the ones that get the 6s to hit auto wound. If you use this stratagem for a unit, then it goes to 5s to auto wound. Again, that's going to be particularly strong on anything with low strength that you're wounding on 5s with anyway, and that could combo very nicely with Lord Solar Leontus's rerolls. You could have a lot of your hits auto wounding. Overlapping Fields of Fire is now an unrestricted one, not just for Cadians. It's 2 CP when you destroy an enemy model now, and that model has to have been destroyed by a platoon or squadron unit when they're shooting. If you do so, then any other platoon and squadron units can reroll wound rolls of 1 against that unit, and 6s to wound get an extra pip of AP. It's an okay shooting buff. It'll vary a lot depending on what's shooting what, but maybe somewhere in the lines of 20 to 30% in terms of a damage boost, and that damage boost could apply to quite a lot of units if you are focus firing. If you're basically going to be firing your entire army into an enemy Death Star unit, then it's probably worth 2 CP. If not, then probably not. Volley Fire for 2 CP is an infantry squad specific one. It does appear that the variant infantry squads, so Kaschans, Cadians and Death Corps, they can also get this, and it's basically just fire again with that same unit. Maybe a little bit pricey for the raw damage output, but say if you came to the end of your shooting phase and the enemy just had, say, one key unit with their character on one wound left or something like that, that could easily be worth it to stop them from retreating it or stopping it from dealing its damage next turn. The infantry squad does have to have remained stationary though, and that is going to limit it quite a lot. Kind of situational in my opinion. For 1 CP, we've got Experienced Eye. Kazakin or Elite Sharpshooters core units get to improve their AP of their attack by 1, AP -3 hotshots whenever you want them. Being able to farm it out with the other units is kind of okay, but the Kazakin are maybe the best core unit that you want to use it on normally. I guess could be alright on something like Sentinels, I suppose. Finally, for battlefield tactics, we've got Immovable Indoctrination. This one's an Militarum Tempestus infantry one. When they're attacked on an objective, you get to reduce the enemy AP by -1, and they can't re-roll wound rolls. That one's quite a nice reactive defensive buff, kind of take cover but better, but for Militarum Tempestus only. If they happen to be already getting light cover, that could actually make them quite annoying to remove with things like AP -1 guns. Even with this though, they're not going to be super durable for the points at 11 points per guy. Next up, we've got Epic Deeds. First up, for 1 or 2 CP, we have Relentless. A vehicle counts as being on its top profile, 2 CP for being on Titanic, and you declare this in your command phase and it lasts until your next one. If you have vehicles hitting on 6s or 5s for turret weapons, then zooming up to hitting on 4s and 3s again could easily be worth 1 CP. That's be a pretty massive damage boost. For 1 CP, we've got Field Promotion. If your Warlord gets slain, then you get to nominate another officer to take up the mantle. They count as your Warlord for objective purposes, and you get to pick another Warlord trait for them, which could be quite handy to have something useful to counter the enemy. Hopefully you wouldn't need to use this very much, but I guess say if you had something like Ironhand Strachan as your Warlord with that fighty trait, you could feel a little bit less bad about throwing him to his death, and then you get to nominate another character to take up the reins and get a powerful boost. For 1 or 2 CP, we've got really quite a fun one called Vengeful Salute. When a battle tank or super heavy gets killed, then you get to fire one last time with a turret weapon, counting as ballistic skill 5+ when you do so. I believe that with the turret weapon rule, I think that would still stack to become a 4+, though I'm a little unsure as to their intent there. It costs 2 CP for super heavies, so still 1 CP for a mighty Rogal Dorn. For 1 CP, when your tank dies, that's going to give you some fairly meaningful damage in the opponent's phase, and you could potentially try and ruin an enemy unit that's just about to deal damage. Chewing up a fragile squad that was just about to charge seems like an optimal idea. For 1 CP, we've got Crush Them. This one's battle tanks or super heavies, counting as weapon skill 4 in melee. If it has the armoured keyword, then it counts as weapon skill 3+. That's the Track Guards one. And also, in addition to that, wound rolls of a 6 deal 1 mortal wound as well. This one's really not too bad. Battle tanks get 6 attacks now, so that should be enough to rogue kill a light infantry or 2. They don't have to worry about being locked up in melee as much due to the turret weapon rule, and this one's particularly nasty for Baneblades with their 9 attacks at strength 9 and damage 2, never mind the mortal wounds. Perhaps not your first choice of damage dealer, but if say you needed to get a tank onto an objective and clear out a last couple of light infantry that were clinging to it, this could be a way. For 1 CP, we've got Battlefield Surgery. A medic keyworded unit gets to revive D3 models from the guard units, but not officers. I feel like this one's a bit lower value than similar ones for other factions maybe. Guard models do tend to be quite cheap. I guess in a really depleted squad, reviving something like a special weapon or a unit sergeant, that could make it a bit more viable. For 1 or 2 CP, we've got Fire on My Position. When a Voxcaster unit dies in melee, you get to trigger this if you want to. Units within 3 inches take D3 mortal wounds on a 4+, and it's a bit better for things like Deathcore of Krieg. They have the Cult of Sacrifice keyword, which makes this stratagem go off on a 1 CP. Typically, I'd say that's not going to be worth it just for the raw damage output. You'd have to be absolutely surrounded in enemy units to get enough mortal wounds out of it to make it worth it. It's more a thing that maybe if your enemy had one character that was alive on a couple of wounds left, and it would be absolutely devastating to take it from them, this could be a pretty hilarious way to do so. The imagery of it's also pretty good and pretty guard. Then we've got the Requisition Stratagems, your normal ones for 1 CP for extra Warlord Traits and Relics. You can use both of those twice each for Strike Force. And then there's also a 1 CP one for Sergeant Relics, where you can take the fighty things like the Claw of the Desert Tigers, Emperor's Fury Pistol, the Relic of Lost Cadia for extra hits for nearby shock troops, and Legacy of Caladius, the Relic Chainsword. By far the best though I think is the Barbican's Key, likely on the Kazakin. Jump them across the boards to deliver pretty much guaranteed hotshot death. Moving on, we've got Strategic Ploys next. First up is Orbital Interference for 2 CP if you have an officer of the fleet, and in the enemy reserve step you get to just select one enemy unit that basically can't arrive on the board till the following turn, and that applies even if it's something like a drop pod that could have turned up turn 1. I think it could be pretty annoying for the opponent to say not be able to use an Iron Hands multi-melter drop pod until turn 2 after their Devastator Doctrine has gone away, or also if they had some other really nasty Alpha Strike threat that they desperately wanted on the board turn 2. Still may be a bit pricey, and they will get it in eventually. You can't use it on battle round 3, but this really feels like it could throw a big spanner in the works sometimes. For 1 CP, we've got Maverick Maneuvers. This one's a 6-inch movement after shooting 4 Sentinels. This one lets you move, shoot, move, so you could have them popping out of cover and then hiding somewhere safe again, or just getting a ridiculously long movement. I believe if you combined it with the tank order, you could have them moving 14 inches for Scout Sentinels, then advancing D6, then shooting, then moving a further D6 to get them where they need to be. Definitely a fun one if you just want to have a Sentinel rocket across the board to perhaps a far-flung objective. For 1 CP, we've got Thunderous Charge. These ones are mortal wound impact hits for Ogrin or Rough Riders. You get 1d6 per model of yours that contacts the enemy unit in engagement range, and then roll equal or higher than their toughness to deal a mortal wound. I'd say it's okay. It's going to be good on anything that's got very low toughness, but also quite high saves. Maybe units like certain fancy Eldar or Sisters of Battle. I feel like it might be slightly overkill with some units though. With Rough Riders, you seem like you've got a pretty decent chance of ruining your target most of the time anyway. For 2 CP, we've got Artillery Strike Request. This one needs an Expert Bombardier or a Master of Ordnance on the board. It's a normal sort of Ordnance Strike stratagem. You put a marker down on the board, the enemy has a turn to run out the way, and if they don't manage it, then everything within 6 inches takes D3 mortal wounds on a 2 to 5, or a 6 for D6. Perhaps that could be an interesting enough one to combine with things like Death Strike missiles. If you have multiple different markers coming down on the board over the turn, the opponent won't be able to avoid all of them. For 1 CP, we've got Vicious Traps. Mortal wounds when the enemy charges one of your infantry units in terrain, 2 to 5 for D3 mortal wounds, and a 6 plus for 2d3. Plus there's a whole bunch of things that make the mortal wounds better. You get a +1 if you're either Kaschan or Veteran Guerrillas, +1 if the unit's got a Melter Mine like the Kazakin can take, and hilariously enough, +1 if Sly Marbo's anywhere on the battlefield as well. Again, situationally usable, maybe best for finishing off units that are very scary in combat but don't have that much health left. Not really all that awesome for the damage output usually, unless you're getting the 2d3 fairly reliably. For 1 CP, we've got Acceptable Losses. This one's a pretty brutal one to use when your own unit's locked up in combat with the enemy. If you have one of your own platoon units, or a unit with a Grim Demeanor keyword in combat, then you can still shoot at the enemy unit even though it's engaged in combat. With this one, hit rolls can't be re-rolled for any reason, and if you get any ones to hit, it hits your own unit and guns down some guardsmen. Basically it means that your opponent just really can't hide in combat against a fair amount of the guard though, and it does seem particularly powerful in Grim Demeanor, if even if they charge your battle tanks, you're still going to be firing at them with a bunch of stuff regardless. It could even be potentially interesting for actually trying to kill your own units and finish off your guardsmen, if it then lets the entire rest of the army then shoot at the enemy unit that was trying to wrap and trap them or something. For 1 CP, we've got Fainting Strike, a nice easy support one for Rough Riders. They get to fall back, shoot with their las guns, and then charge again. Generally they're fairly fragile, so I feel like they're not going to be locked up in too many ongoing combats. Either they're going to be dead or out of melee, but not bad if it makes sense for some reason. They're not going to get pinned down by something super durable if it doesn't make sense to. For 1 CP, we've got Flak Barrage. This one's a Hydra one that allows you to intercept enemy aircraft that are hiding off the board. If they turn up from reserve, then you immediately get to shoot them, and Hydras are pretty savage against air units now, getting double the shots. Pretty much guarantees that Hydras are going to be efficient against air targets, and the enemy can't just hide them off the board for an alpha strike and hit the Hydra before it gets hit. For 1 CP, there's Shield of Flesh. A Bulgarian unit makes an infantry unit -1 to hit if they're behind them and also within 3 inches. For me, this one's just not really quite enough of a durability boost. A -1 to hit is okay, but not super standout. I think it's really going to stop something important like Kazakin or Tempestus Scions getting shot down. Between that and the positioning requirement, it's just probably not worth it. For 2 CP, we've got Mount Up. This is a Mechanized Infantry or Militarum Tempestus one, and they can re-embark in a transport after they've shot. I'd say this would be really great for 1 CP. For 2, it's a bit of a premium. If it does make the difference between the unit living to strike again next turn or dying though, then it could be handy enough. Pretty brutal considering that you could be getting out, shooting, and then jumping back in. I guess that could keep one unit super safe if they were inside one of those big transport super heavies. That would be something meaningful for the foe to chew through. Lastly, we've got War Gear Stratagems. The first one is Overcharged Las Cells, and this one is just 1 CP now, where previously it was rumoured to be 2. You use this one when Kazakin or Militarum Tempestus attack with their hotshot lasguns. 6s to wound with hotshot weapons get a mortal wound in addition to their regular damage, but you can only take up to 6 mortal wounds off the enemy with this stratagem. I'd say this was borderline usable at 2 CP. At 1 CP it just seems very good for them. It really is an incentive to take the hotshot volley guns, and does seem particularly nice with born soldiers as well for Kazakin, as it means that those 6s to hit would translate to auto 6s to wound, and give you a pretty decent shot at the 6 mortal wound cap. I feel like the book in general does seem to have a whole ton of options for supporting Kazakin dealing alpha strikes. I guess you could even combine this with the reroll wound rolls one if you've just jumped out of a transport. Rerolling wound rolls and 6s doing mortals is a pretty brutal combo. Next up, we've got smoke launchers for 1 CP, a -1 to hit for a keyworded vehicle. A lot of vehicles do have smoke launchers, nice to have it to be able to pop up when you need it. If enemies got bad ballistic skill, it could seriously reduce the damage. For 2 or 3 CP, we've got ablative plating. This one's a big -1 damage to battle tanks or armoured superiority units if you've taken that specific regimental trait, though if you use it to apply to a Rogal Dorn tank or a super heavy, then it costs 3 CP instead. 3 CP I'd say is maybe just a bit on the steep side. I think this might be most usable on just a standard Leman Russ or tank commander, one that's about to get hit by a whole ton of damage 2 or damage 3 weapons. Finally, we've got a 1 CP Melter Mine attack for a keyworded unit that has it, either Marbo or Kazakin for example. If you're in combat with a vehicle or monster, they take D3+1 mortal wounds on a 2 to 5, or 2d3 on a 6. Odds are that's going to be around about 3 mortal wounds for your privilege, and 1 CP for that really isn't too terrible, particularly if it actually winds up killing the thing that you're in combat with. Overall, a fair amount of solid stratagems in my opinion. I feel like command point farming options are going to be pretty interesting for the guard. There's a lot of ways where you can trade points for raw damage or durability. For my favourites, I think the reroll wound rolls after jumping out of a transport is pretty up there. Transhuman for Cadians for 1 CP is great, auto wounding on 5 pluses for born soldiers is good, and there's multiple different interesting damage boosts for Kazakins and Scions a bit. The mortal wound one looks great, as does the experienced eye stratagem, and some fun support for tanks with things like acting on full brackets, vengeful salute for firing in death, and maybe the -1 damage in a pinch if you think that your tank's going to get focus. Maybe not a whole ton of ridiculously over the top stratagems, but I feel like there's enough usable ones in here not to feel too disappointed. So with that, that's the core rules of the army looked at. So now let's move on to the squads and tanks with a review of the datasheets. Let's start up with troops and then go into heavy support, maybe 2 of the most interesting sections of the Codex. First up, we've got the standard infantry squad. These are 65 points for the 10 models, and similar to previously, just about all the cost of their war gear remains free. The only thing that costs are plasma pistols or power swords on the sergeant. The stat line is unchanged, guardsman remains guardsman, and lasguns are the same. As before, they have the options to take 1 special weapon and 1 heavy weapon. There was some rumours about sniper rifles not being available, and it seems that they aren't on the shock troops, but can still be taken in the standard infantry. As mentioned previously, the Vox castered for free, and it allows 24-inch orders from a Master Vox, and that stratagem to fire on death now. And otherwise you can still take the generic sergeant war gear, and the power sword and the plasma pistol cost 5 points. I'd say the main draw to these guys is the heavy weapon, which the other infantry squads don't get, but I feel like they are facing some pretty stiff competition from the Cadians. The Cadian shock troops are 65 points as well. They get the Cadian keyword in addition to the rest, so they get to use that Cadian transhuman physiology type rule, so you can't be wounded on a 1 to 3 if you use a CP. They still get the regimental doctrines and everything, the Cadian bit's just an extra, and otherwise they seem to be a very similar unit. The main trade-offs are that you can't take a heavy weapon, but you do get 2 specials, you can't take snipers in them, and you can't double up on special weapons, kind of similar to a lot of units in the Codex. For the sergeant choices, they don't have the option of taking power swords or plasma pistols, kind of a shame for a close range unit, but they can take a rather good drum-fed auto gun for free, 24 inches and rapid fire 2, strength 3, AP 0 and damage 1. Quite nice that way you can have a sergeant actually contribute meaningfully to the squad's damage output, rather than feeling like a hindrance. Finally, they do have the shock troop special rule as well, extra hits on 6s with las guns and las pistols, so a little bit more damage output there, though not huge. In general, between the stratagem at the shock troops and the drum-fed autogun, I do feel that maybe the Cadian shock troops are probably the go-to troops choice at the moment. They really do have a lot of good things going for them. If I was using other models from other regiments, then I'd basically just say that those models are using the shock troops rules and just clearly mark them out with a shoulder pad or something. Next up, we've got the Kaschan Jungle Fighters, 70 points for some reason. They get the Katachan keyword for some slightly better vicious traps, and again have the same stat line as the others. These guys really seem like they're badly balanced against the rest, to be honest. War gear wise, they get 2 flamers and a Voxcaster for free. No unique war gear options besides that, or anything on the Sergeant, and their special rule is just that they hit with extra attacks on 6s with melee attacks. They really are pretty rubbish, to be honest. I feel like they might be a slightly tough sell even if they were 5 points cheaper than the other 2 previous units. As they're 5 points more, they just feel so much inferior to the Cadians right now. Finally, we've got the Deathcore of Kree squad. This one's more expensive at 75 points, so 10 more than the Cadians, and they get the Deathcore keyword in addition to their normal ones. Again, stat line wise, they're the same. They do get some different war gear options though. It's quite fun that they get the option of 3 different special weapons if you want to. 1 plasma gun, and then potentially 2 other non-plasma special weapons that again you can't double up. They do have a slightly weird rule though, where they have to choose between their plasma gun or their Voxcaster. You can't have both. Otherwise, the main reason to take these is just that they're more durable. The med pack is a 5-point upgrade that allows you to ignore the first failed save each turn. That will save a guardsman's life each time they're attacked, plus it gives them the keywords to allow you to resurrect some slain guardsmen if it makes sense to. The Watchmaster can take the plasma pistol and power sword again this time, again for 5 points each. The rest of the gear is free. The Sergeant can also take a bolter for free, and they have a nice special rule where wound rolls of 1 and 2 automatically fail against them, so basically mini transhuman in effect all the time. These guys seem usable enough, to be honest. I feel like they could be an interesting choice to put in a Chimera. Invest a little bit more in a unit that's a bit more tanky, and also gets an additional special weapon to boot. Out of the troops though, I do think that the Cadian shock troops really do take the win on this one. Cheap, better volume fire, 2 special weapons, and some handy stratagem and synergy access. Moving on to the heavy support, and we'll start with the king of the section in the Leman Russ. These guys are a heavy support choice at 155 points base now. That price does include the hull mounted weapon, they all cost the same at 5. These are pretty much the one vehicle that can still be taken in squadrons. The previous rule where you could field 3 of them in a slot and then broken down into individual ones. Losing that rule on a bunch of other things does kind of suck for people who own a whole ton of, say, Basilisks or Hellhounds or something. I guess with rule of 3 it's only 3 per army now. Otherwise, it's got the battle tank for some synergies and the squadron keyword for Mechanised Orders. It isn't core, so you can't give rerolls to it out of things like Cadian Castellans. Statline wise, it's got a 10-inch move, hits on 4s at range, strength 7 and toughness 8, a big 13 wounds, so gained 1 there, 6 attacks, leadership 7, and a 2+ save. It has lost grinding advance, but to be honest, this is a positive, not a negative. Its damage output is better due to the turret weapon rule giving it the +1 to hit and fire out of combat, plus massively boosted turret weapon profiles in the first place. Losing grinded advance means that you can get to move 10 inches and still fire to maximal effect, so it really is quite a good thing. Options wise, here are the profiles for the various different weapons. The battle cannon's d6+3 shots at strength 8 and damage 3. The demolisher's d6 shots, pretty similar average shots to the 2d6 it would have had before, and gaining damage 3 is huge. The demolisher tank's a bit more focused now. It'll lose a lot of shots on average, only having d6, but they do come at a big damage d3+3 now, and given the turret weapon boost is still similarly efficient against hard targets. It is a bit worse against infantry though. The Punisher Gatling cannon will only get 20 shots rather than the 40 it was getting previously with grinding advance. It's now strength 6 and AP -1 though, so those shots bite harder. Good against 1 wound infantry, not very exciting against most other things though. The Eradicator Nova cannon gets more shots at d3+6, but it's only strength 6, AP -2 and damage 2. Just feels pretty inferior to the battle cannon to me. It does get to ignore cover though. The Executioner Plasma Cannon I think is really good. d6+3 at strength 7, AP -4 and damage 3 if you're overcharging. Warns do mortal wounds, though if that's absolutely critical then you can just choose not to, and you still get damage 2 and strength 7. It's got shorter range than the mortal wound thing, but getting it at 2 AP pip better than the battle cannon and the same profile otherwise is seriously nice. The Exterminator Autocannon is just kind of inferior. 6 shots at strength 8, AP -2 and damage 2. Take the battle cannon instead in my opinion. I've got no idea why they didn't just keep this at 8 shots, even then it wouldn't be particularly exciting. And finally, the single scariest gun of the lot is the Vanquisher Cannon, a single huge shot at strength 14, AP -5, a massive damage d3+6, it cuts straight through enemy invul saves like the Tau Hammerhead does, and also gets a d3 mortal wounds if it converts. Really quite a swingy weapon, typically you're going to get around 10 wounds or none. Not going to be really any use against most infantry at all. But this thing really is going to take a chunk out of tanks and seems to combo great with that doctrine that allows you a single hit reroll. Overall, I'd say that these are maybe a bit more balanced than they were in the previous book, where it was usually Demolisher all the way. Multiple different ones seem interesting. I feel like maybe the Executioner Plasma Cannon might be the standout of the bunch, but the Battle Cannon has its advantages in great range. The Demolisher is okay against heavies, and the Vanquisher is going to reign supreme against hard targets with good invuls, smashing straight through them. Otherwise on the tank, the upgrades have some broadly good news as well. Heavy Bolter or Heavy Flamer sponsons now only cost a mere 5 points, which is pretty exciting. I'd say that one of those options is pretty much auto-include now, although you could upgrade to Plasma Cannons for 10 points each, or Multi-Melters for 15. These things will only be hitting on 4s though, not 3s. Otherwise you can still take Heavy Stubbers or Hunter Killer Missiles, both of which are 5 points. The Armoured Tracks and the Dozer Blades have changed as we mentioned previously. Armoured Tracks gives them +1 to saves versus damage 1 weapons, plus the Armoured keyword. And Dozer Blades for the 5 points give you the Dozer Blade thing to get more mortal wounds when you use that charge order, plus ignoring movement modifiers. I feel like it's perhaps hard to go wrong with something like a Leman Russ Executioner with a pair of sponsons of your choice depending on how spendy you're feeling. Overall, I'd say broadly good news for the Russ. Looks like it's still going to remain a competitive staple. Next up, for the new tank on the block, we've got the Rogal Dorn, a bigger and heavier one at 250 points. That includes your choice of the hull weapons or the turret weapons, both of which cost the same, and it's got the same sort of keywords: battle tank, regimental, smoke and squadron. You can't take multiple Rogal Dorns per heavy support slot though, it is just the one of them. Compared with the Leman Russ, a lot is quite similar. The main differences are strength 8, toughness 9, and a big 17 wounds. Math hammer wise, it does seem to check out as fairly comparable to the Leman Russ, depending on exactly what you're shooting at it with. For the main gun, you've got the Oppressor Cannon and the Twin Battle Cannon. The Oppressor Cannon and the Coaxial Auto Cannon it comes with just seems flat superior into just about every target. I would take that. It's D6 plus 3, strength 10, AP minus 3, and damage 4, so it's pretty brutal. The Twin Battle Cannon has a really weird profile. 2d6 at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 3, so for some reason just really doesn't seem like 2 times the amount of battle cannon shots that the Russ gets. For some reason it gets around about the same shots but just at slightly better AP. The hull weapon gives you the choice between the Pulverizer Cannon and the Castigator Gatling Cannon. The Pulverizer is sort of a mini demolisher, 24-inch range and d6 shots, strength 8, AP 2 and damage 3, a good generalist weapon. The Gatling Cannon gives you 12 shots at the Punisher profile, strength 6, AP minus 1 and damage 1. Again, they seem fairly equivalent to me. I'd maybe be a bit more tempted by the Pulverizer out of the two. The sponsons only have the choice of Heavy Bolters or Multi-Melters at the same points as the Russ. I feel like again for 5 points for a Heavy Bolter you'd be hard pressed to turn that down, and the Multi-Melters seem like an okay deal too. You then get one Heavy Stubber for free, and then the option of Hull Mounted Extra Heavy Stubbers or Multi-Melters each at 5 points, and the option of Armoured Tracks at 5. Overall, I'd say it seems pretty nicely balanced against the Leman Russ, maybe a bit more of a target for the Tankcase traits potentially, as it's a bigger and more exciting platform. Packs some very scary guns, and looks like it would be a bit of a pain to try and deal with at 17 wounds, toughness 9 and that save. Next up with gun tanks, we'll start with the Hydra. As mentioned before, we can't field those in squadrons anymore, it's just one per slot, really quite sad. They cost the same at 110 points. The Chimera chassis vehicles seem to have been consolidated a little bit. The heavy gun ones get a 10-inch move, they all have toughness 7 now, even the more open-topped ones, and 11 wounds with a 3+ save. The gun platform ones like these don't get the turret weapon keyword, so they will be hitting on 4s. The Hydra autocannon has seen a small buff. It still has the heavy 8 shots, but now is AP minus 2, damage 2, rather than AP minus 1. It no longer has minus 1 to hit versus ground targets, which was kind of disappointing, but now it only gets the +1 to hit against aircraft, though against aircraft it is ridiculously strong now, as it also gets double the shots. It'll be very efficient at pinging planes out of the sky, though a bit so-so against most other things. As with the rest of the slightly artillery-style vehicles, the upgrades cost 5 points each. You can take a Dozer Blade, Armor Tracks, and Hunter Killer Missile, though it seems that most of these artillery-style things can no longer take Heavy Stubbers or Storm Bolters anymore, which is a bit unfortunate for those that had them modelled. It does have that 1 CP intercepts aircraft type stratagem. I feel like overall though it's likely to get a bit overshadowed. If we get to a point though where the majority of competitive lists are taking some aircraft, I'm sure it'll spring out of the woodwork as a good choice again. I guess Tower Orcs do use their fair share of aircraft at the moment, but the majority of factions don't. Next up we've got the Basilisk, a heavy support choice at 140 points now, so 15 more than before. Again, no multiple choices per slot, which is sad. you probably have to commit to spearheads. It's got the same stat line as the Hydra, gaining +1 toughness, and like the rest of the artillery style ones, it has the smoke keyword and the squadron one, which does allow it to receive tank orders if they're going. The Earthshaker cannon is significantly better than it was. D6 plus 3 shots at strength 10, AP 3 and damage 2. That will land far more hits than it did before, and gaining +1 strength isn't bad either. Obviously it pays a bit of a premium for its damage compared with battle tanks, which have 2 direct line of fire, but for barrage weapons this does seem pretty efficient, particularly if you combined it with that expert bombardier's tactic. The Manticore really does feel like just a different flavour competitor to the Basilisk now. It's also 140 points, getting a lot cheaper, and overall I would say it's still a little bit stronger than before. It gets D6 plus 3 shots with the Storm Eagle rockets, very close to the amount that it would average before, but those attacks are now at strength 9, AP minus 2 and damage 3. It's got 1 pip less strength, though it's not the most meaningful. Upgrading to damage 3 built in though is really big, and it will give it the edge over Basilisk against the vast majority of hard targets and 3 wound infantry. It is limited to only 4 shots per game, while the Basilisk gets 5 though, which is one thing. I guess you could kind of see it as front loading the damage slightly. Keywords wise, it also has squadron and artillery, meaning that you can get some of the buffs like expert bombardiers. Both the artillery tanks do seem pretty solid here. Next up, we've got the Wyvern, a heavy support choice that got a fair bit cheaper at 15 points less. Similar changes, keywords, stat line, and squadrons wise. The Stormshard mortars are now 46 shots at strength 5, AP minus 1 and damage 1. You lost the reroll wounds for extra AP and strength. Doing a bit of math hammer on the majority of the targets, it really does seem like it's pretty equivalent, so getting 15 points cheaper is a bit of a win overall. Seems like it could be a particularly interesting one for that tank order that allows you to double the number of units for the purposes of the blast rule. Firing out a massive 24 shots with this thing is going to tip the balance between making it good. I feel like one of them could be a pretty interesting thing to have on the board to counter infantry heavy lists. One of these with that order could really chew up things like Sister's Repentia hiding out of line of sight. It would absolutely demolish them with the amount of fire it has. Finally, for the artillery style vehicles, if you want literally all of your firepower ramped up into one massive missile, we've got the Death Strike, a heavy support choice for 160 points now. This thing was utterly useless before, but now it's kind of interesting. Rather than just being a simple weapon that you fire, it's now basically more of an area denial type thing. In your turn, you do an action and nominate a target anywhere on the board, and then your opponent has the chance to run away from the missile that's about to land there. If they can get away from it, then you don't actually need to launch it though, and you can just do the action again to nominate another target and make the enemy flee from that point. Pretty spooky to have on the board, and you could combine it with other things like psychic powers or the tank order for potentially slowing down units, slow moving or static things, and terrain that the opponent might move around. Could be nice if you had multiple of them as well. You could create quite a big kill zone that the opponent just can't avoid. For missile choices, there's 3 different ones. The Godspear one is the seriously scary looking one. It only has a tiny area of effect though, of just 3 inches from the centre of the marker, so usually if you're hitting anything with it, then it's got to be a bit of a weird situation and a unit that really couldn't move very far. If anything does land home though, say against an immobile unit, on a 2-3 you get 8 mortal wounds on the target, a 4-5 for 12 mortal wounds, and a 6 for 16 mortal wounds. Pretty mad, should obliterate a whole load of units in one go, but generally going to be more of a theoretical threat than one that you actually hit things with. The biggest issue with this one is that it's just not quite enough to cover an entire objective marker. This thing is measured from a point, whereas objective markers are measured from a base, and it means that you can't 100% deny an objective from your opponent, which might have been the best use for this. Maybe a bit more usable for that purpose might be the Vortex missile. This one hits units within D3 plus 3 inches, so should cover an objective, though the damage is pretty tiny by comparison. 2-3 for D3 mortal wounds, 4-5 for D3 plus 1, or 6 for 2D3. After you're resolved though, it remains on the table for another turn for a 4+. I guess if you get a bit lucky, you could have a rift that just eats away at the enemy unit over a few turns, and that could be pretty savage. Finally, if you find yourself playing against an army with loads of expendable units, maybe the Plasma Barrage might be the better. It's a big D3 plus 6 inch area of effect, so even with a full move, some units might still struggle, and it hits with a fair bit of bite. 2-3 for D3 plus 1 mortal wounds, 4-5 for 2D3, and a 6 for D3 plus 3. It's -1 to that roll for infantry characters though. Perhaps what's particularly nice is that you get to tailor this missile to your opponent. You get to select it after you've seen your opponent's list, so you're not stuck by using a missile that's going to be pretty irrelevant in your matchup. Overall, I think it's fun and definitely one that you can play mind games with your opponent and basically try and make them move the way that you want to or risk massive damage. Finally, it does have a higher explosion chance of on a 3+ if it hasn't fired its missile yet, but it still only does D3 mortal wounds. Seems fun though. I do quite like the way that you can basically play some mind games with it. Finally, with the heavy support section, there's the heavy weapon teams and the new bigger field ordnance batteries. Heavy support units have now gone up to 55 points, a tiny bit more expensive than they were, though all their guns remain free. They get core, regimental and platoon keywords, so they're quite a nice one for that take aim order for +1 to hit and an extra AP -1, particularly as it can splash to multiple units. I was kind of hoping that they'd make these things just a little bit more durable, maybe give them a toughness 4 to represent some of the armoured guns and things, or 3 wounds or something, but it does seem that they're still just as easy to kill as 2 guardsmen. It does mean that they're still a bit questionable whether or not you want to use them if they're actually going to be using the direct line of sight ones. Maybe mortars are still one of the best picks for that reason, though a few las cannons lurking in the backfield might be annoying to deal with some armies with low range shooting. Still though, I feel like the support for infantry units like this has got a fair bit better. They probably are still worth it. Mortars in particular could give you some nice ignores line of sight fire, and be quite an interesting one for that order that hands out -1 to hit. Lastly, for heavy support, we've got field ordnance batteries, one of the new units for the Guard Codex. It seems that you can only take these in units of 2 now. You can't field them in squadrons of 4 or anything, as was rumoured, but they're also a little bit cheaper than they were in the rumours as well, at 130 points per unit. Stat line wise, they are basically big heavy weapon teams, but with a bit more protection. They move 6 inches, hit on 4s, a strength 3 and toughness 4, a fairly solid 6 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7 and a 4+ save. They're kind of an interesting unit keywords wise. They're neither infantry nor vehicles, which is perhaps a bit of a departure from Games Workshop. They often seem to come down one way or the other for most units these days. I believe that does mean that they could potentially move and fire for no penalty though, as they're not infantry, so that's pretty helpful for wiggling around and getting a bit of line of sight. Weapons wise, they're all 48 inches and they all cost the same. The heavy las cannon gives you 2 shots at strength 10, AP -4 and damage D3+3. Fairly nasty dedicated anti-tank. I think you'd want the order to get them hitting on 3s with that to make it a bit more reliable. The Malleus rocket launcher is D6+6 shots at strength 6, AP -1 and damage 1 and blast. Damage wise, that's maybe not super exciting. Not going to be too strong against anything besides 1 wound infantry. And finally there's the Bombast field gun. Heavy D6 at strength 7, AP -2 and damage 2. Blast and ignores line of sight. And kind of an interesting alternative to the artillery tanks, as you could give these guys take aim for extra AP and +1 to hit. I think supporting these with orders if you're running them is going to be fairly mandatory. Still reasonably fragile for the points cost in my opinion, at toughness 4 and the 4+ save. I'm not sure how well these are realistically going to stack up against battle tanks that have a lot of durability and better movement. I feel like these guys might struggle a bit in comparison, even with orders. It turns out each squad also comes with a couple of las guns as well, so the other 2 can contribute to fire a bit while one guy fires the gun. Next up, seeing as we've gone through most of the tanks, it might make sense to talk super heavies as well. We do have all the Baneblades and their variants still represented in the Codex, various different points costs, and some big improvements. Statline wise, they're almost as much as 2 Rogal Dorns stapled together. They move 10 inches, hit at 4s at range and 5s in melee, strength and toughness of 9, a massive 30 wounds, 9 attacks, leadership 8 and a 2+ save. Titanic does give them some disadvantages with terrain and things, but just in terms of raw survivability on the table, they do seem quite good. It appears that the transport variants do have 28 wounds though, so a little bit less good there. Otherwise, their big scary guns gain turret weapons, hitting on 3s and firing out of melee. They come with those armoured tracks as standards, for better save against the damage 1, and they lost the ability to fall back and charge it would seem, but can still fall back and shoot, being a Titanic unit. Their combat remains strength 9, AP -2 and damage 2, so at least a little bit threatening even with no buffs, and quite nice with crush them. And one nice boost that they got was that their first set of sponsons is included for free now, either heavy bolters or heavy flamers paired with las cannons, and the second set costs 40 points for the entire pair. I feel like for 40 points for the extra pair of sponsons, that's a pretty decent deal. You are basically getting 6 heavy weapons for that cost. There's no option for vehicle upgrades, taking heavy stubbers or anything. A few of the variants do have extra weapons built in though. Here is the list of the various different Baneblade variants. The standard one's 430 and has a similar main gun, 3d6 shots at strength 9, AP 3 and damage 3, a generalist all-rounder. Hitting with the turret weapon +1 to hit will be greatly appreciated, and it also packs the Demolisher Cannon and the Coaxial Autocannon as well. The Baneblade Demolisher Cannon doesn't get the same buff that the Leman Russ does, it still remains damage D6. The Bane Hammer's pretty cheap at 400 points. That one's kind of similar damage output to the Baneblade with 2d6 +3, strength 10, AP -3 and damage 3. It no longer limits movement though. It can also transport 25 models, and one unit can fire out of the firing deck rather than everyone. The Bane Sword is nice and cheap, 390 points, and has a scary main gun. D6 plus 6, strength 14, AP minus 4, and damage 4. Looks pretty good in comparison to the Baneblade there. I feel like we might need to do a bit of math hammer comparing these various different turrets at some stage. The Doom Hammer is 420 points. This one's heavy D6 plus 3, strength 10, AP minus 5, damage D6 plus 2, and getting an extra plus 2 damage at half range for the Melter rule. Very savage, Melter heavy anti-tank that one. I feel like that one's particularly good if you're within half range. It also is a transport with the 28 wounds. The Hellhammer has had a bit of a weird side grade. It now gets a lot of shots at 3d6 plus 6, strength 7, AP minus 2, and damage 2, and ignoring light cover. Pretty much a target that's okay against medium infantry, though not enormously exciting, and it also comes with the extra Demolisher cannon. Even if it was the same as the other variants, I don't think it will be quite as good. I feel like costing a lot more, it's really not going to be taken. The Shadow Sword is also one of the expensive ones at 450. This one has the pretty monumental 120-inch range Shadow Sword Volcano Cannon. This is D3 plus 3 shots, strength 18, AP minus 5, and a casual flat damage 12. Pretty much one of the worst guns for any tank in the game to be targeted with. A pretty reasonable chance at one-shotting knights, even with invul saves. This one doesn't ignore invul saves, unlike the Vanquisher Cannon, but still it's got so many shots that it probably doesn't matter as much. The Stormlord is 430 points and gets 20 shots at strength 6, AP minus 2, and damage 2. It also has the firing deck and transports 40 if you want to. You can fit an awful lot of things in here to maybe use with that mechanized keyword. A bit underwhelming in terms of firepower though. I feel like it could have got a few more shots. And finally we have the Storm Sword, 60 inch with heavy D6 plus 6, strength 12, AP 4, and damage D3 plus 3, again ignoring light cover. That one's a pretty savage tank against armor. Overall, I feel like for a fair few of these there isn't an enormous amount separating the different variants. A fair few are quite similarly efficient against a bunch of targets. I would say that the more anti-infantry focused Hellhammer and Stormlord do look worse than most of the rest. The Shadow Sword does look kind of hilariously scary with the damage 12, and I will aim to make a bit of a breakdown video comparing these and talking about which ones might be best in the near future. Moving on, let's take a look at the elites next, and we'll start out with the Kazakin. I'd say these new guys are looking like one of the most exciting units in the book. Maybe Games Workshop wants to sell a few of those new kits perhaps, and come at 100 points for a squad of 10. You can't take them in smaller squads like you can Scions. They get core, regimental, and the platoon keywords, so get regimental doctrines when Scions do not. And as we've already talked about in Stratagems, do have an awful lot of very good damage boosts available to them really quite easily. Their standard weapons are the Hotshot Lasguns, 24 inches at rapid fire 1, strength 3, AP 2, and damage 1. They've gained a bit of range there. One of them can opt to trade their lasgun for a hotshot pistol and a melter mine. That allows the anti-vehicle melee stratagem plus better vicious traps, and then 4 of them can take special weapons, a maximum of 2 of each as per the kit. The hotshot volley gun has a new profile, 24 inches at rapid fire 2, strength 4, AP minus 2, and damage 1. Good for spamming out more hotshot goodness if you want to. If you want to trade one guy's hotshot lasgun in, then you can take a hotshot sniper rifle for free. That one's a single shot at strength 4, AP minus 2, and damage 3. The damage 3 is maybe a bit of a surprise there, perhaps. You can target characters, and 6s to wound do a single mortal wound in addition to normal damage. The only things that cost are the plasma pistol and the power sword on the sergeant. The squad does get a Voxcaster, and in terms of special rules, they get an extra regimental doctrine, provided it's not taken by any other units in your army. A few good ones there. If you're just using the one Kazakin squad and a Chimera or something, then the mechanized one seems nice. Things like extra range or ignoring cover up close both seem nice too though. Kazakin are going to be starting on the board though. They can't deep strike unlike the Scions, so that is one advantage on the Scion side of things. Overall, I would expect to see Kazakin run really quite a bit. There's a whole load of decent buffs for core synergies and making infantry units hit hard. Kazakin maybe do seem the best focal point for everything to come together at maximum. Tempestus Scions do appear to be their rivals now. They're now an elite's choice at base for 11 points per model, so won't be getting OBSEC unless you run an entire detachment on them when they become troops. They do get the core and platoon keywords, so you can give them rerolls and orders. It doesn't look like you have to have a Tempesta Prime to order them anymore. You can use other things, but they aren't regimental, so they basically trade out their custom doctrines for their exploding 6s to hit rule, so basically a flat damage boost all the time. Otherwise, in terms of stat line and war gear, they're quite similar to the Kazakin. They also get 2 attacks and a 4+ save, and leadership 8 on the sergeant. And besides that, a fair few of their rules are kind of similar. Hotshot lasguns are the same, their special weapons are similar. You can only take 2 of them per squad of 5 and they must be different now, so unfortunately no doubling up on plasma for a small unit. Plasma and melter still seems pretty reasonable though. Overall, Kazakin maybe seem better as a focal point type unit, but Scions still seem interesting. Small units for deep striking purposes are good, plus they do have some very nasty buffs available to them. Things like those nasty Warlord Traits, the Refractor Field Generator, or jumping out of Valkyries pretty nicely. Auxilia next, and first up we have the Ogryn. These guys are pretty significantly improved on all fronts. That's pretty good, as they were generally dreadful. The main limitations that they have now are that they're up to 30 points per model rather than 25, and you can only take up to 6 models in a unit, so maybe a little bit less efficient for buffs. They have the Auxilia keyword, and they're not regimental, platoon, or corps, so there's only a few things that really give them decent advantages, things like Commissar Orders or Ministorum Priest prayers. What they lack in synergy though, they perhaps make up for in raw muscle. They're now strength 6, toughness 5, 3 wounds and 4 attacks, so an extra attack and strength, though they no longer have the extra attack on the charge. On the durability front, -1 damage makes them a significantly more tanky unit, really nice versus anything damage 2 or 3 coming in to kill them. And perhaps the most exciting thing about them now is actually their shooting. That Ripper gun is as big and dangerous as it looks. 3 shots at strength 5, AP -2 and damage 2, and it grants an extra pip of AP in melee as before. A bit of a flex to a close range shooting unit, and to give them a bit of insurance against being locked up, they can also fire in combat, so your opponent can't just tag them with something durable, not unless they want to get a lot of lead shot at them to the face. I'm still not 100% sure whether it gets to them quite to the point where they're one of the stronger units in the Guard Codex, but I feel like they're a lot more usable if you wanted to run a squad of them. Bullgryns still seem to be a pretty solid alternative. They're 30 points per model, so are unchanged from what they were, though you will be paying 5 points extra if you take the Bullgryn more, which is probably still worth the upgrade. Generally, they basically have the same raw changes as the Ogryn, extra attacks and more strength. They gain -1 damage as well, which is very nice considering they're actually quite tanky. Otherwise, their rules are broadly the same. The Slab Shield just flat up grants a 2+ save now, no more adding to saves. The Brute Shield gives a 4+ invul, and if you wanted to use the Grenadier Gauntlets, they're now d6 shots at strength 4, AP -1 and damage 1. I feel like probably the damage 2 mauls are usually going to weigh out over that when you've got 4 attacks going, but I guess if you just want a cheap tough unit that mauls infantry, these guys will do that. They don't have any similar rule for firing in combat though, maybe because the weapons are blast. I guess could be interesting enough if you give them Obsec with a Commissar maybe. A unit of 6 of them with the shields and the mauls does look like they could be a pain to shift with that -1 damage. Lastly, for the bigger units of Auxilia, we have the Rattlings. I think these guys went from kind of rubbish to a pretty interesting choice to be honest. They're 10 points per model now and are locked to just 5 models, so 50 points for the squad. Ideally, I'd usually want to fill them in squads of 5 anyway, really, so it's maybe not the biggest loss unless you happen to own 30 of them. Their stat line's the same as it was before, slightly slow moving, and a pretty weedy strength and toughness of 2. They've retained their +1 save in cover, which still doesn't make them particularly durable, but they've also gained a -1 to hits, which doesn't hurt. Their sniper rifle gets an extra pip of AP, which is also okay against things without Armour of Contempt. It retains their move shoot move, so they could ping out of cover, shoot something with the sniper damage, and hide back behind it. And finally, their forward deployment has been helped out a bit. They can set up anywhere that's greater than 9 inches from the enemy, so are a bit better for maybe hiding on a midfield objective out of line of sight. Like the Ogryns and Bullgryns, they don't have core, platoon or regimental, so they very much do their own thing. That could be an interesting choice to start on a midfield objective, maybe do early game actions like raise those banners, and potentially contribute a bit of sniper damage while remaining unseen. Next up we've got the Munitorum Servitors. They're 40 points for the 4 of them now, and have their same mediocre stat line. They hit on 4s, and their leadership 9 when they're near an engine sear, and you can fill them slot free if you have one. 2 out of 4 of them can take a heavy weapon at 5 points, 10 points, or 15 points for the various sorts, and to be honest, just overall they seem kind of rubbish. I feel like Games Workshop have charged extra for them just to make them not too stand out as the cheapest infantry unit in the book. It still seems they fit that role, but because they're so useless otherwise, you still might not be all that tempted by them. Still though, if literally all you wanted was 4 bodies to sit on a point and raise a banner or something, I guess they would technically still do that cheaper than most anything else. Really bad at anything besides just being a cheap unit though. Moving on to the fast attack, and first up we'll start with the Attilan Rough Riders. Games Workshop's recently returned Guard Cavalry, 20 points per model and squad size of 5 to 10. Keywords wise, they're cavalry, corps, platoon and regimental, which means that they do get regimental traits and can take orders. Statline and damage wise, these guys really are very dangerous. They move 12, hit on 3s with 2 attacks at some brutal Melter Lance profiles, and defensive wise, they're toughness 4 and a 4+ save, so maybe won't die to a stiff breeze, but they certainly aren't particularly durable. Wargear wise, they get that hunting lance, plus a las gun, a las pistol, and frag grenades, so they can chip in with a little bit of small arms fire as they move up. Really though, they are all about that lance charge, either choosing the frag tip each time they fight, which is strength user, AP -1 and damage 1, each hit counting as triple. They're typically going to be strength 6 on the charge, as they get a special rule called Scything Momentum that gives them +2 strength. So on average with those attacks, 5 guys averages something like 20+ hits at strength 6, AP -1 and damage 1. That'll clear out infantry nicely, and if you want to attack tanks then you take the melter tip, strength 6 or 8 on the charge, AP -4 and damage 3, an excellent vehicle or terminator killer. The sergeant also gets a free power saber, which is strength +1, AP -3 and damage 2. Not worth it over the melter tip, but it means that you get 1 extra attack that you get to make at that weapon profile. And if you want to spend a little bit more on the squad, then you can take 5 points for a gold lance, a strength +2, AP 3 and damage 2, each hit this time counting as double, and also dealing a mortal wound to vehicles as well, which is pretty significant. Overall, the sheer damage output on these guys is just monstrous, potentially with things like the Lord Solar rerolls and the fixed bayonet order. You're going to be having small squads of them posing a serious threat to knights in combat, which is kind of mental, and they also have a special rule that allows them to ignore modifiers to move, advance and charge as well, so hopefully should be a bit more reliable at getting them there. Their combat damage output really is kind of unquestioned, but I must admit I do feel that delivering them might not be quite as easy as you might hope for. The cavalry base might mean that they have a little bit of issues with terrain and take turns exposed. Against any sort of meaningful firepower, they get to fall apart pretty quickly. Anything with a pip of AP and damage 2 like heavy bolters is going to chew through them very fast. Still though, at 100 points for a squad for some crazy melee damage threat, they seem pretty handy just to use even as something like a countercharge threat. They seem hard to go too far wrong with. Hellhounds next, and another fast attack choice that can no longer be taken in squadrons. They move 12 inches, hit on 4s, strength 6, toughness 7, 11 wounds, pretty similar to how they were before. The improvements for these guys come to their turret weapons. They do indeed count as turret weapons for +1 to hit on the melter cannon and firing out of combat. The Inferno cannon is 18-inch range and gained AP -2, quite good against infantry. The Chem cannon is now far more worth it, 12-inch range and D3+3 hits at strength 2, AP 3, damage 2, auto hits the enemy, and wounds all non-vehicles on a 2+. Fairly savage against things like Space Marines there. Finally, the Melter Cannon is D3 shots at strength 9, AP -4, and damage D6+2, getting the Melter rule for more damage up close, and hitting on 3s with the turret thing. Beyond that, they can take a multi-melter for 10 points, have the option for armoured tracks, though it is a bit sad that it doesn't lock in the movement for them anymore. That was quite nice on the last upgrade, as Hellhound's auto-hitting basically could move around and function very well till they died. It doesn't look like there's any option for them to take Stormbolters or Stubbers anymore, but they can take Dozer-Blades and Hunter-Killer missiles, and all 3 of the variants explode on a 5+ now. Finally, the turret weapon shoots on Death Stratagem could be particularly interesting on them. If you've got armoured superiority to trigger it, then for 1 CP you can get another gout of flame out of it. Auto hitting means that the ballistic skill thing doesn't matter. Overall, it's a kind of usable but maybe not standout. Will be interesting to see how their numbers stack up against Russes sometime. Sentinels next, and there's the 2 different variants, the Scout one and the Armoured one. It seems to be pretty much all good news for these. The Scout one perhaps my favourite of the 2 at 40 points. These are unchanged, can now take plasma cannons and any of the other special weapons for free. Their movement got 3 inch better to 12 inches. They're now toughness 6 and 7 wounds, so significantly harder to kill. And perhaps best of all, traded their pre-game move for a forward deployment one. You can set these up on midfield objectives if you'd like to, or screen out the enemy. Their damage output I'd still say isn't super exciting, but they are really quite tough per point still, and they are maybe one of the most buffable units in the entire book. They're core, platoon, squadron units with regimental. It means that they can take any of the orders, tank orders or infantry ones. The plasma cannon looks like a really solid choice for it now, and it only deals 1 mortal wound if you roll that dreaded 1 to hit. It doesn't kill the whole model. The multi-laser's been buffed a bit, 4 shots at strength 6, AP -1 and damage 1. Not terrible, but not standout, I think. And in terms of upgrades, you can still take the Hunter-Killer missile and Chainsword, both at 5 points, and the Chainsword is kind of fun at AP -2 and 2 damage melee. Kind of funny that you could order a unit of these to fix bayonets, and hit on 3s with AP -3 if you want to. The Chainsword also gives you an extra attack. Otherwise, the Armoured Sentinels cost 5 points more. They trade the forward deployment for a little bit of extra toughness. They have the 3+ save and get a +1 save against damage 1 weapons. Not too bad on light vehicles. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same. Otherwise, they're a bit slower than the Scout Sentinel as well. I think overall, for the extra 5 points, I'd rather have the extra speed and the forward deploy. Maybe the armoured ones could be a bit more interesting if you want to actually try and use them as a damage dealer. While we're on the faster units in the Codex, I thought we'd cover the Valkyrie. This guy's 140 points base now, so went up 20 points, though its damage output did improve a bit. Like most other things, it can't be taken in squadrons anymore. It's one flyer per slot, it's not a dedicated transport, so I'm afraid Scion Air Cavalry is still off the table annoyingly. Keywords wise, they've picked up the Militarum Tempestus one, as well as Aeronautica Imperialis. They aren't squadron units and they aren't regiments, so perhaps miss out on a fair few synergies. It's not all bad news though, as their damage output definitely got better. Their ballistic skill 3+ all the time now, not just some of it. The multi-laser got a bit better if you're using that one, and then you've got the choice between the missiles to back it up. The Hell Strikes give you a single shot at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 3. Against aircraft it's +1 to hit and damage D3+3, but I feel like they're not really worth taking over the missile pods, each of which gives you D6 shots at strength 6, AP 2 and damage 1. Heavy bolters also seem fairly auto-include as well, 10 points for the pair now rather than just for one of them. It just seems silly to pass up that many extra shots at ballistic skill 3+. They still get to basically keep their grav shooting insertion type thing. After the Valkyrie has moved, you get to disembark a unit. Normal units can set up greater than 9 inches away from the enemy. Scion's greater than 6 inches away, so we can let them get properly close. Though if you move greater than 20 inches, you still do have the chance for models to die, on a 1 for each model that jumps out. Quite nice for slingshotting units to somewhere scary. I guess it could be an alternative to that mechanized infantry thing in other transports. Otherwise, it's got usual flyer things like hard to hit. It has a hover mode that loses them and caps its movement at 20, and it can deep strike for free now, so easy to put in reserve. One nerf though is that the unit that's jumped out of the Valkyrie can't charge anymore, so no more throwing Ogrin in it and jumping them out to try and make a Mimi first turn charge. Transport choices next, and first up we have the trusted Chimera. This one's 85 points, so 10 points more than it was. The extra points don't really help too much, but it has gained a wound from where it was previously, and a little bit of extra damage output as well, as whatever gun you choose to put on the top gets the turret weapon keyword for +1 to hit. All the weapons cost the same now, so you can take 2 heavy bolters if you want to, and it not cost you any extra. And in terms of keywords, it's got the squadron keyword and the smoke keyword, as well as other things that you'd expect. Again, the multi-laser got buffed, heavy 4 and AP -1. The lasgun arrays remain 6 lasguns stuck together. You can fire with them if you have a squad embarked. This one can still take the Stubber or Stormbolter on the top hatch, as the kit comes with one, and it can also take Hunter Killer Missile, Armoured Tracks or Dozer Blades, though maybe they're a bit less exciting here. I still feel like Chimeras are going to be very useful. 12 transport slots means that you could say have a squad of Kazakin plus an officer to order them, and have them jump out and the officer issue the order when they do. Chimeras can also function as a mobile command vehicle as well, so you can issue orders from their hull, ideally have the officer or command squad or something keep safe within and safe from a sniper's bullets. Overall still seems strong, particularly given the transport synergies in the new book. The Taurox was utterly inferior in the previous codex, but now it's actually a bit cheaper than the Chimera. It's a fair bit more tempting. This one's gone down a big 20 points from where it was, though it was significantly worse than the Chimera before. Statline wise, it's unchanged, has the squadron and armoured keywords, it gets those armoured tracks included for free. It doesn't have the smoke keyword though, unlike the Chimera, and you only have a transport of 10 and can't issue orders out of it. Overall seems fine and usable though. Far more balanced against the Chimera now, I think. A nice cheap basic entry transport that's a bit easier to kill, versus a premium one that's a bit tougher and packs more firepower with the lasguns and that nice mobile command vehicle rule and the extra transport. The Taurox Prime has also seen some changes for the Tempestus as well. This one's now 105 points base, so -10 from where it was. All the guns cost the same once more, so those might have saved you even more points. You can't take any more of these than you can Militarum Tempestus infantry units, so you can't just take guard units and spam them as gun platforms. Though to be honest, I'm not sure it would have made sense to in the first place. This one very much is a Scion Taurox, hits on 3s, gets the armoured tracks, squadron and Tempestus, but not regiment. Weapons wise, there's a few changes there. The battle cannon's D6 shots at strength 7, AP -1 and damage 2. The Gatling cannon has arguably had a downgrade, 12 shots at strength 4, AP -1 and damage 1. Against a few targets the AP -1 might be better, but with Armour of Contempt around it was probably better just to have the volume fire. Finally, the missile launchers are the same cost, 2 crack shots or 2 frag shots. I'd probably still go for them or the Gatling cannon over the battle cannon for me. The battle cannon still seems a bit inferior. Otherwise, beyond that, you can take Torok's hotshot volley guns or auto cannons. They're all included for free as well. The hotshot volley guns got a bit better for it. They're rapid fire 3 rather than rapid fire 2 on the standard Scions. It means they could in theory be putting out 12 shots at close range. Genuinely quite scary, and this thing can still do anti-horde work pretty well. It doesn't appear to get the exploding hits on 6s though that the rest of the Scions get. Finally, before we take a look at the characters, we've also got the Fortification, new to the book in the Aegis defense line. This thing's 40 points for basically some battlefield terrain. There's not really a lot on the datasheet besides the traits described for it. Defense line, light cover and heavy cover. Area terrain, defensible and obstacle. Most of those are fairly intuitive. I do find it a bit weird that it's not listed as a barricade though, as it clearly is one. It doesn't really have a clearly defined footprint, so Games Workshop are probably going to need to FAQ that one if they want to keep it as area terrain, so maybe a little bit of a rules writing fail there. Otherwise though, if you are receiving benefits of cover from it, you worsen AP by -1 whenever a model is receiving the benefit of cover. That looks like it's friend or foe, and could also benefit other Imperium units as well. In particular, something like Bulgrin standing behind this look like they would be incredibly hard to remove, both getting their 2+ save, then +1, then worsening AP when the enemy shoots them. Seems like it could be scary enough for a few of them on a home field objective, or even just some infantry manning the gun line and getting a 4+ save against most things, or an effective 3+ against anything that has AP. It doesn't appear that there's any rules for the gun platform that comes with the kit. I guess it's always been a bit clunky, and I suppose that you're just focusing on the barricades this time. Lastly, let's go through all the Astra Militarum character choices. We'll cover both the HQ and the Elites ones here, and as mentioned towards the start of the video, really quite a lot have gone away. Yarrick has disappeared and is confirmed dead. Creed and Kell are gone, though Ursula Creed appears to take up the mantle. Knight Commander Pask is gone, just run him as a tank commander I suppose. The Lord Commissar isn't there anymore, you can only field a regular one now, and a bunch of the commanders and regimental advisors have basically been rejigged. Most of them all fall under the remit of the command squad. You can take the Cadian Castellan independently though, who very much has the feel of the old company commander. Starting off, first we have Ursula Creed, an HQ choice for 80 points. She moves 6 inches, hits on 3s, is strength and toughness 3, 5 wounds and 5 attacks, leadership 9 and a 4+ save with a 5+ invul from the refractor field. She's definitely mainly there for the buffs rather than damage dealing, but her pistols are pretty savage at close range. 4 shots at strength 5, AP -1 and damage 2, so could easily kill a Space Marine or 2. She also has a power sword with 5 attacks, though it is just damage 1, could still be okay for killing light infantry. Her command buffs are definitely what you want to take her for. She's got 3 Regimental Orders, so some really good flexibility there. You could have different squads doing different things, and what's more, every time she issues an order, the direct target of the order gets a +1 strength to their ranged attacks as well as the benefits. This one really is pretty big. You could have things like hotshot las guns from Kazakin or Scions going off on a strength of 4, or the bombast field guns on strength 8 maybe. There aren't all that many units that don't care about a strength boost like that. On top of that, she also gets to use the CP reroll twice per phase if desired. Sometimes that could be handy if you just desperately need to reroll something that's gone wrong, and her, like all the other senior officers, also get a reroll once to hit for core units within 6 inches, so several different layers of buffs all in one here. Overall seems pretty solid. I feel like the main draw to running her as your HQ is probably going to be the extra strength orders. If she's just telling units to take aim, then she can get that to happen but better. The new Cadian Castellan is basically the new equivalent of the company commander. He's an HQ choice for 50 points, and he's an alternative to taking a command squad. He does have that commandant keyword, so you can't have one of him in the same detachment as Creed, who also has one. Otherwise, he's got the regimental keyword, an officer, and the Cadian keyword. Cadian is just an extra that allows you a few more stratagems. Statline wise, he's an infantry character that hits on 3s, has got 5 wounds and 4 attacks, so fairly meaty there. Leadership 9, a 5+ save, and a 5+ invul. Weapons wise, there's a few options that are slightly clunky, purely based on Games Workshop's new model kit I think. Most of the options are free, but you have to pay 5 points for either the plasma pistol or the power fist if you want those, and some of the combos aren't takeable due to which hand the model that they sell comes with. He should be fairly efficient in a fight though, with the power sword at least, 4 attacks at strength 4. Again, he's really here for the orders though, reroll 1s to hit for core units within 6 inches, and 2 different regimental orders. If you want orders in your list, he's the most efficient way basically, and that's not bad on top of giving a reroll. Again, could be a cheaper option to sit alongside some heavy weapons and buff them, or maybe jump out of chimeras alongside Kazakin or infantry squads. The Primaris Psyker is 60 points for the unit now, plus 10 from the 50 he was before. He counts as Auxiliar now apparently, so doesn't get Regimental. His stat line's kind of unchanged, but he has got a big buff really. He casts 2 powers and denies 1 where he could only cast 1 before. He knows Smite and 2 powers. Things like Night Shroud, Psychic Maelstrom, or Psychic Barrier maybe seem like the picks of the bunch. I'd say it's pretty reasonable for 60 points. Defend 1 unit and maybe switch to some Mortal Wounds if it makes sense. The command squad has a couple of different variants, both a Cadian one and a Platoon one, and it's really quite a complex, involved unit. They're both 75 points and come with 5 models base, and they are character keyword protected now, so they have the officer within the unit, and they can't be directly shot normally due to Lookout Sir. I guess that these are representing slightly more junior commanders than the Castellan, as they don't have the commandant keyword, so you could take a Castellan and a command squad for example, and they're not platoon, which means that they can't order their own orders to themselves unless you take that Warlord Trait. The officer's a little bit less impressive than the Castellan, 4 wounds and 3 attacks, but largely similar, and the veteran guardsmen are ballistic skill 4+ now, but get 2 attacks base. Options wise, there's a whole load going on. They get the Power Fist or Plasma Pistol on the officer for 5 points each, and otherwise literally all the other war gear is free, including a bunch of specialist stuff. You'd have to think pretty carefully as to how you're going to equip each one of them and which upgrades are worth it, as you can't take it all. They've got the different specialists within the unit, the Medic to give the unit a 5+ feel no pain and gain the Medic keyword. The Regimental Standard gives you reroll 1s to wound in an aura. You could pair that with the Castellan or Creed ones. And the Master Vox can make your orders go a bit further, ordering out to 24 inches on other units with Vox casters. It does just appear to affect the officer in this unit. You can't have a Castellan stand nearby and make use of it, unfortunately. Otherwise, for the rest of the veterans, there's some slight differences between the Cadian one and the Platoon one. It looks like the Platoon 1's main difference is that they can take a free heavy weapon team that combines 2 of the guardsmen together, and up to 1 of each of the special weapons, whereas the Cadian one I think is just the special weapons, plus you get the Cadian keyword for things like Vengeance for Cadia and the Transhuman Physiology stratagem. Both of them seem fine to be honest, the differences seem a bit minimal, and I kind of wonder why they really bothered making them separate datasheets. Overall looks like an interesting little buff package. I'd probably take the standard for the reroll 1s. The medic seems good for a bit more durability, and then load up with a couple of special weapons or a heavy. But then this is only half the story of it, as you also get to add advisors to the unit, which bring their own interesting buffs and benefits. The way advisors work is that you can basically add 1 of each to the unit if you want to, so you could take an Ogren bodyguard and each of the rest, and have really quite a big character protected unit with 9 models. They're no longer independent characters anymore, so you have a few less guard characters roaming around. The Ogren bodyguard is a big 50 points, but he really is quite stacked and adds a fair bit of durability to the unit. Pretty much the Ogren profile from before, but with 5 attacks and 6 wounds. He gets the -1 damage, has options for most of the various different bits of Ogren kit, plus a huge knife that's strength user, AP -2 and damage 2 with +1 attack. Quite a nice combat option, probably better than the Borgrim Maul. It's also -1 damage and has to take damage for the squad first. If you want to upgrade the Ogren to the next level, you could also take Nork Deadog for an extra 10 points as well. He's hittier at weapon skill 2+, tougher at 7 wounds and gets 6 attacks, and 6 to wounds do a mortal wound. Still not really convinced it makes the squad overall fighty or tanky in combat, but certainly means that they're a credible melee threat if you do want to countercharge the enemy. Otherwise, the other advisors are all very easy to kill, 1 wound and toughness 3, so you really want to keep your command squad not targeted. The Astropath is 40 points, and it is a mini psyker that can cast 1 spell. You get the choice of the first 3 on the discipline, so not Night Shroud for this one, crucially. You can do Psychic Barrier though, or more likely just spam out his own unique psychic action at Warp Charge 7 and farm up 1 CP per turn. Seems pretty nice for some pretty guaranteed extra command points as the game goes on. He has lost his ability to grant ignores cover to units, I'm afraid, but at least he can do full-blooded smites now. The Officer of the Fleet gives you a buff to aircraft. Any command phase you nominate 1 unit that's visible to him and within 30 inches. Aeronautica Imperialis units get reroll 1s to hit versus it. Not terrible, but I wouldn't say that the Valkyries are particularly decent damage options, and he can only take 2 of them in match play. He does unlock that stratagem to deny reserves though again that is pricey at 2 CP. The Master of Ordnance on the other hand is pretty interesting. 25 points to do similar but for artillery. I feel like artillery are just a bit more usable as damage dealers, so if you're trying to focus down 1 threat that is visible, he'll help out. He also unlocks that bombardment stratagem for 2 CP, where you nominate the point on the board and the enemy runs away. Overall, out of these, I think the Astropath and the Officer of the Fleet are both interesting. I feel like most people probably aren't going to shell out for the Ogre and Bodyguard. They do look good fun as countercharging, but it usually just doesn't make sense to invest a lot of points in combat that's just going to sit behind the lines. Definitely a whole ton of ways that you can use the command squad though. Will be interesting to see what people make of them. We're not quite done with command squads, as the Tempestor Scions also have one. They're also 75 points, including the Tempestor. Broadly speaking, they're pretty similar, but hit on 3s and have 4 plus armor. The Tempestor does get his 5 plus invul refractor field now, and he can issue orders to Scions only. Perhaps an interesting upgrade for this one is the Command Rod, which allows the bearer to also know the Prefectus Orders, as well as the regimental ones. I guess that makes them particularly flexible commanders. Similar to the command squads, the special weapons are free, but only one of each max, and they can take a Master Vox, Standard and Medic, the same as the other command squads. They also have exploding 6s to hit as well. Overall, stat-wise, compared with the command squad, they do seem kind of flatly superior. Exploding 6s to hit, better ballistic skill, and better armor, plus deep strike. I guess the main disadvantages are not taking the regimental advisors, and only being able to order scions and no one else. Moving on, Ironhand Strachan is looking better than ever, I think. He was pretty usable for Catachans back in the previous Codex, and he's 75 points now, 5 points cheaper, basically having most of the good things about Acadian Castellan, but is also monstrously fighty as well. He is a commandant though, so you can't have him and, say, Creed in the same detachment. He moves 6 inches, hits on 2s in melee and 3s at range, is strength 6 and toughness 4, a big 5 wounds and 6 attacks, which is pretty powerful. Kind of weird to see him basically being flat more powerful than a Space Marine captain at the moment. He also has a 3 plus save and a 4 plus invul, and is just all around pretty mighty. Weapons wise, he's got his plasma pistol, an auto shotgun with 3 shots at strength 4, AP 0 and damage 2, and his bionic arm and devil's claw gives him attacks at strength 6, AP minus 3 and damage 2, so a lot better than it was before. Plus if you do pay for that Warlord trait, he gets extra hits on 6s and plus 1 to wound as well, making him genuinely pretty threatening to most things that he fights. Otherwise, he does commandant things with a reroll 1s to hit aura plus 2 regimental orders. When he issues an order to a unit, then 6s to hit in melee auto wound with them. Still probably not going to be enough to make things like Kazakin or even jungle fighters particularly fighting, but I guess doesn't hurt if you're looking to bully some light infantry or something. He personally gets reroll wounds versus monsters, though for all this he did lose that aura of +1 attack, which was really quite nice on Catachan lists. Overall he seems pretty great to be honest. If you don't need any specific Warlord trait or relic or anything, then for 25 points above the commandant, he does look very solid for that role. Gaunt's Ghosts are a new entry for the Codex. Previously they had their own standalone datasheet. They're an HQ choice for 120 points, so 5 points cheaper than they were, and they do remain a very complex unit, with each of the characters having their own thing, between 2 and 4 wounds, and between 2 and 4 attacks each. They're a bit of a mixed unit that does a bunch of things, between an autocannon, sniper, a couple of melee specialists, and Gaunt. Compared with their previous datasheet, Gaunt can order Prefectus Orders, and could be an interesting choice for taking his own Warlord trait, seeing as that means he can issue orders to his own units. Larkin's Long Las appears to have become damage 3, and they still seem to retain that rule where they can't be shot outside of 18 inches. That could be pretty interesting for them holding down objectives. It looks like they have lost that infinite grenades loophole combo for Bragg though, so unfortunately he's not going to be able to do that steady thing where he theoretically throws frag grenades forever. It was a potential rules loophole before. Overall they seem okay as a generalist, and they've got a lot of interesting special rules going on. They just maybe don't lend themselves enormously to any one battlefield role, being kind of okay at shooting and okay at melee, but only against light infantry for the most part. Tank commanders next, and not really as much to say about these. They previously were the terrors of the previous Guard Codex. They no longer hit on 3s unfortunately, it is just 4s, though the turret weapon will still hit on 3s with the turret weapon rule. Keywords wise, they're officers, characters, battle tanks, smoke and regimental. They aren't squadrons, so they can't order themselves, and they aren't commandants, so they aren't going to interfere with anything there. Essentially, a tank commander is just a Leman Russ in the HQ slot, and rather than being able to take orders, they're able to give orders, of which they can issue one mechanized one under normal circumstances. Could be interesting for other things like that Relic battle cannon, which is seriously vicious. And I feel like if you are running a bunch of battle tanks, you almost certainly want mechanized orders, though you could get them from other sources, like an infantry character with that Warlord trait, or Lord Solar. Speaking of which, and last for our actual HQ choices, we have Lord Solar Leontus. Fancy Gold Man on horse is 9 power or 170 points, and he's a new Supreme Commander for the Astra Militarum. That'll mean that he's easy to include without taking up HQ slots, as he can just field him in his own detachment, and he does have the regimental keyword as well, so he will get the benefits of whichever one you pick. He is far more expensive than most of the other characters, but brings quite a lot to the table. His own stat line isn't too bad with a 12-inch move, hitting on 2s, strength 6, toughness 4, 8 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 10 and a 3+ save with a 4+ invul. A fair amount of speed and raw might there. He's got a refractor helm that gives him that invul save, plus halves damage. He'll be striking at strength 6, AP -3 and damage 2 in combat with Conquest, the blade that he's presumably reclaimed from Lord Solar Macarius, so he's okay in melee, but he isn't really going to be soloing entire squads. With his Warlord trait, Iron Hand Strachan hits harder. He does have Soul's Righteous Gaze, a pistol which gives you 2 shots at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 3, a nice general purpose profile that nothing really wants to get hit by. He does bring a fair amount of value just for his raw stat line alone, but really it's the buffs that you'd really want to include him for. First up, he gets you a free command point, which if you choose to pass that up, you could have the option of changing a secondary objective after revealing them. Most of the time I think I just want to take the free command point. Occasionally maybe it could allow you to counter your opponent in some way. For rerolls, he gets a 6-inch aura of reroll 1s to hit and wound for core units. Pretty nice to have in the centre of a formation, I guess. And on top of that, he has a command phase reroll buff where he targets one specific unit. If he selects a core character or battle tank unit, then they get 4 rerolls to hit, and if they happen to be a core unit, they also get 4 rerolls to wound as well. Seems absolutely brutal on things like Rough Riders with their crazy damage that they have already, and seems pretty nice on Kazakin as well with a flurry of high AP, low strength attacks. Just the hit rerolls alone though seem very usable on some of the scary battle tanks, maybe a tricked out Leman Russ of some sort with some multi-melters, or even better, a mighty Rogal Dorn. Finally, this guy is basically God of Orders. He can issue 3 of them a turn, and unlike any of the other things, he's got access to literally all 3 disciplines, Prefectus, Regimental and Mechanicus Orders, and can go next level with a bunch of them, issuing all the infantry orders to auxiliary and officers if he needs to. Could be interesting for fixed bayonets for things like Bulgrin, and he can issue Mechanized Orders to vehicle officers and super heavies, so he can command a tank commander, or give reroll 1s to hit to a Baneblade. Overall, I think he does look really quite tempting to have at the heart of a battle line. A CP and his melee profile I think already make up a fair bit of his worth. The amount of rerolls and orders that he gets on top of that though are just pretty outstanding. Lastly for the characters, we'll get into the Elite's choice ones, and we'll start out with the legend himself, Sly Marbo. He brings 50 points worth of Rambo Action Man to the table, and has a fairly punchy stat line with a 6-inch move, hitting on 2s, strength of 4, toughness 3, 5 wounds, 5 attacks, leadership 7 and a 5+ save. He's actually got a surprising amount of generous keywords. He is platoon, so you can order him. You could give him fixed bayonets if you wanted extra AP, for example. He's got the Meltermine keyword for those stratagems, plus regimental, so he actually does get your regiment buff as well. He could have an extra pip of strength with the brutal strength one. Weapons wise, he seems to be good at hunting medium to light infantry. His Ripper pistol has 3 shots at strength 5, AP 2 and damage 2. That ignores Lookout Sir and mortal wounds on 6s, so it's actually pretty credible at killing characters. And he's got an Envenomed Blade at strength +2, AP -2 and damage 1, or it goes to damage 2 versus non-vehicles. Pretty solid with 5 attacks there. Could easily kill a couple of Space Marines. He's got a few special rules. He can't be a Warlord, he can deep strike, and he rerolls charges when he does, and once per game at the end of the fight phase, he can go back into reserve if you think that he's in a bad position and is just going to get killed. I guess in theory you could drop down, fire off a burst with that Ripper pistol, attempt to charge, which he can reroll. I guess ideally try and pick on something that he can kill, and then whether or not he actually does any damage at all that turn, just go back into reserve regardless, and then do the thing all over again turn 3. Hopefully between 2 rounds of shooting and potentially 2 rounds of combat, he might well have justified his 50 points, never mind what else happens. The Meltermine does seem particularly nasty for him as well. For 1 CP while he's in cover, you could do 2d3 mortal wounds to charging enemies on the roll of a 3+. Overall, I think he does look like pretty solid value, a nice little disruptive threat to hunt down enemy infantry or maybe light characters. Next up, we've got Gunnery Sergeant Harker. He's only 40 points now as an elite choice, 10 points less than he was. He's got a fairly beefy profile as well, hitting on 3s, strength 5, toughness 4, 4 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 7 and a 5+ save. He's a regiment and a Catachan officer, and he fights with Payback and Assault 3 Heavy Bolter with AP -2. Abilities wise, he's got a 5+ Feel No Pain. He gets to issue 1 order to Catachan Jungle Fighters, only that 1 datasheet, and he also gets to upgrade 1 Jungle Fighters unit to get reroll 1s to hit, both in melee and in shooting. I feel like he's kind of the sole reason that you'd actually want to field a Kasachan Jungle Fighters unit for the extra 5 points over the standard ones. You can get built-in reroll ones to hit, and a very cheap character to give them an order, plus that character can blaze away with a fairly reasonable shooting weapon while they do that. For 110 points overall for that little formation doesn't seem the worst. Probably doesn't seem significantly better than just sticking to Cadians and things though. Next up, we've got the Tech Priest Engines here, a 40 points Elite's choice, 5 points more than previous. It's not regimental, but has the Auxiliary keyword, and his stat line is basically the same, but gained Ballistic Skill 3+. The reason to take him is that he heals a vehicle for D3 wounds each turn at the end of his movement phase. If he gets to do that over a few turns, he could fairly reliably return more wounds of tank to the board than he cost. Plus, after he's done that, maybe he could do a little bit in combat, admittedly not much, and while he's doing his repairs, he can keep one vehicle with a 5+ invul save. You have to nominate one vehicle within 3 inches in the command phase, and that's not too bad either. Maybe a little bit more interesting on the 3+ save vehicles than the 2+ ones, as they're going to trigger the invul more. Overall, I think if you're running a lot of vehicles, I don't think it'd be a bad choice at all. Pretty cheap, and makes the tank line just that little bit tougher. The Regimental Preacher is next, at 40 points for an Elite's choice, unchanged from before. The way that he works has changed quite a bit. He's got a kind of unimpressive stat line, but he gets to re-roll his own hits in melee, and then he can choose between a 2-shot shotgun at strength 4 and 12-inch range, or combine more for a bit of strength and AP in combat. Really though, the main reason to bring him is his prayer. He casts a prayer on a 3+ each command phase. You get to choose a core or infantry character unit, and then choose a buff for them, either a 6+ invul and ignores maledictions, or reroll hits in melee and a +1 to charge. I was thinking that you could use that on Bulgrin or something, but it seems not anymore. They're neither core nor characters. For 40 points, I'm just not really too impressed with either of those. I guess the 6+ invul can give him something to do while something's moving up the board towards the enemy. It could make one squad just that little bit tougher. I feel that it's the combat buff where the real value is to be had, but it's just not really worth it on 1-attack guardsman or fairly expensive 2-attack Kazakin, particularly as it goes off in a 3+ and isn't really very compatible with transports. Really, I think to be worth it, he needs to set his sights a bit higher. You're probably going to need to buff either Rough Riders or maybe even Sentinel Chainswords. 4 rerolls to hit on the Rough Riders would definitely be worth it, so I guess if you're using a lot of those, then potentially you could throw this on them in the command phase, and then off they go charging across the board for the rest of the turn. Still though, a bit niche and will fail 1/3 of the time, and you can't re-roll it. Perhaps a maybe choice if you're using Rough Riders, otherwise almost certainly not. Finally, we've got the Commissar, a 40 points Elite's choice, so has gone up a big +15 points, but has become a lot more worth it with those Prefectus Orders. They're easy to field in a detachment, as they can be fielded slotless if a command squad or commandant is present, and in terms of keywords, they do count as an officer now. They have most expected ones, but they don't have regimental, so don't get those buffs. Officer's pretty handy, as it does mean that his orders will splash to other platoon units. Statline wise, he hits on 3s, has 4 wounds and 3 attacks, a 5+ save with a refractor field, so gained a tiny bit of durability for the points increase. Weapons wise, he has lost some options. He can take a plasma pistol and power sword, each for 5 points. Otherwise, it's bolt pistol and chainsword. There's no options for power fist or bolter, unfortunately. We went through the Prefectus Orders previously, so I won't labour the point there. It does seem like Auspex is quite nice on Bulgrins, and a bunch of the other ones just seem like really powerful situational moves that you could pull off, and it seems like he would be pretty good value lurking in an infantry battle line. He no longer lets you use his leadership for morale test, but he will execute you, so perhaps you won't mind too much. The summary execution rule now basically means that 1 unit per turn within 6 inches can ignore combat attrition. I guess it represents the first casualty from the morale test getting blammed and scaring the rest of them into line. Overall seems fine for 40 points. Seems like a bit of an add-on choice though. Maybe it's one to look at which units you're fielding and whether or not they'd actually make sense to have the Commissar alongside. Maybe most interesting for Ogrins and Bulgrins due to their limited support. So with Commissars out the way, that just about brings us to the end of our look over Codex Astra Militarum. A bit of a beast of a book, and some interesting improvements to pretty much most of the units within. Generally I'd say that after this the Guard are looking far stronger, even if a bunch of iconic things have been lost, so it does take off a bit of the feel good of the Codex coming out perhaps. Going through the book for the strongest things, I do feel that orders are perhaps better than ever. Just about every single one is very usable in the right situation, and having them splash to other units is nice. The Warlord Traits are pretty great, command point farming and redeployment are a good start. There's some interesting relics including the Relic Gatekeeper and the Barbican's Key. and the whole army special rule regimental doctrines might have lost a little bit of the flavour of the individual regiment choices, but it does look like there are genuinely good ways to play guard in different formats, depending on whether, say, you're taking loads of artillery, or loads of units in transports, or various other things. The psychic powers seem usable, Night Shroud would be good on a big tank, the tank cases are interesting, maybe a little bit less auto-include, but a couple of them seem really solid for the Dawn at least. The Stratagems have some powerful things, and I think really help with transport. I feel like Kazakin are maybe the biggest winners out of the Stratagem section. There's multiple ways to get a lot more damage out of them. For most competitive units, I'd say that Cadian shock troops are definitely going to be included quite a bit. Both the Russes and the Dawns seem pretty usable in terms of damage dealers. I feel like we'll see plenty of those around, and it could be quite interesting seeing more heavy tank armies. I feel that getting to shoot out of combat when they were locked up is really quite a big asset, and that could change the whole flavour of mechanised lists. Artillery seems solid, the Death Strike seems scary, Rough Riders seem absolutely brutal in terms of their melee damage, Sentinels seem really nice cheap units to hold down the midfield and screen out the foe, and really quite a lot of the characters do seem to provide some pretty nice buffs for how much they cost. It's going to be good fun experimenting with a few lists. In any case, let me know what you think though, any particular combos or interesting bits jumping out at you, and of course let me know if there's any errors or mistakes that are made in this. I will endeavour to post a pinned correction comments to highlight anything I've got too badly wrong. I'm certainly looking forward to making a whole ton more guard videos over the next few weeks. Hopefully I'll try and get a unit review out for most of the major units in the Codex, plus a bunch of comparison pieces and some other things. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that, and maybe check out the Rogal Dorn tank video that I've already made. I released that yesterday. It was good fun to run a few number comparisons from the Dorn tank and against the Russ. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that links down in the video description. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making enormous long videos like this. The Codex reviews do take ages, so if you have got good value out of it, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.